Chapter 1. It was necessary to report to the brothers and sisters about the release of a new book. June 1st was a festival. Here I wish everyone a happy June 1st. Hee. I will use this new book as a Children's Day gift for my brothers and sisters. Many people asked me why did I release the book on June 1st. The answer, how should I put it? It was easy to explain, but to really explain it in detail, there was a psychological process. Everyone, in their own hearts, will retain that childish heart. Whether it was an old man in his 60s, a man in his prime, or a young man regardless of gender. After all, in life the most beautiful, purest, and happiest period is our childhood. Childhood with a childish heart. Someone once said, as long as there is a dream and can still dream, the childish heart will always exist. Dreams. Wuxia is a fairy tale for adults. Xuanhuan is also a fairy tale for all of us. Although in reality we can't move mountains and fill seas and we can't do whatever we want, but it doesn't mean that we can't do it in our imagination. In the world of novels we can. This is also our dream. I also have my dreams and I also have my childish heart. Feng Ling was not young this year. Sometimes, looking at his own hair, he had a feeling that he didn't recognize it. 8 years ago, when he first entered the online novel circle, he still had a head of black hair. The brothers and sisters who followed me all the way knew that at that time, I typed very slowly or even did not know how to type. I could only use time to write. Therefore, updating at least 6,000 words a day or even more than 10,000 words required a lot of time. When writing The Legend of Ling Tian, how long I wrote was the same as how long I stayed up all night. At that time it was caused by my slow typing. When writing about the evil lord of a different world, the results improved and my ambition grew. However, to support this ambition I had to work even harder so that my ambition could go further, and there would be hope for my dream to come true. At that time when I was poor there was only one word: fight. At that time I thought, everyone has a life and everyone wants to use this life to fight for a future. The problem is many people don't dare to fight, but I dare. So fight. Keep fighting. If you want to compete with me in word count, I'll waste time with you. If I can't compete with you in word count, I'll double the time to make up for it. If you compete with me in time, I will compete with you in days. If you write for 8 hours a day, I will write for 16 hours for 2 consecutive days. Is that enough? If you follow my rhythm, then I'll fight you to the death. I fought for a month straight. He had fought for 3 consecutive months. For half a year straight. Fighting for a year straight. Fighting for several years straight. In short, I must kill my way out of this bloody path. The evil lord of a different world had more than 4 million words, and it took him 1 year and 4 months to finish writing it. Basically, apart from the public before it was published, it exploded every day. The otherworldly evil monarch wrote all night for a year. After I finished writing The Evil Monarch, I realized that my hair had turned white. At that time, I looked in the mirror and plucked. And then there was the world-defying stage 9th heaven. At that time he wanted to slow down and take a break. He was too tired. His body couldn't take it either. However, as everyone knew, world-defying did not do well in the beginning. I didn't want my results to be too bad. I didn't want my results to fall back. But if the results were bad, what should I do? So, I had no choice but to clench my teeth and continue to fight. The brothers and sisters who followed me all the way should still remember the madness at that time. From the time World Defying was published to the end of World Defying 5 million words, it took more than 3 years and 40 months. The continuous outbursts lasted at least 30 months. This kind of continuous eruption basically required me to stay up all night. This kind of intensity completely exhausted my body. After World Defying finished writing, I realized that half of my hair had turned white. When I went out, I actually needed to dye my hair. Ling Tian, Evil Monarch, World Defying. These 3 books took 6 years. In these 6 years, it was equivalent to writing all night for 5 years. Tired? Tired. But satisfied? Satisfied. All because of the dissatisfaction in my heart. Just because I am not satisfied. Everyone has a life. Why can't I fight for a glorious future with this life of mine? So fight. Fight to the death, it's life. Fight to the death, it's luck. I often heard and saw people saying that Feng Ling Tian had good luck. Feng Ling Tian is obedient. Feng Ling Tian how and how. Feng Ling Shui. Feng Ling Tian has too much water. Other than writing brothers, Feng Ling Tian doesn't know how to write anything else. Feng Ling Tian only relies on a few limericks. Feng Ling Tian how and how. In short, this person doesn't have any ability, he just got lucky. But even if he was lucky, without 6 years of desperate work and 5 years of all-nighters, would I be able to keep this kind of luck? Even if it was water, writing more than 20 million words in more than 7 years, an average of 10,000 words a day, this kind of hard work, people who don't write can't understand. Then there was Firmament of Heavens. I also wrote this book very seriously, but I have to admit that my body couldn't take it anymore. Although there were outbursts, there was more time to rest. After writing Firmament, I realized that more than half of my hair had turned white. 2/3. But I still have regrets in my heart. Because whether it was Ling Tian, the evil monarch Ao Shi, or Firmament, they weren't my peak, they all had too many shortcomings. Sometimes when I look back at the books I wrote, I often sigh, I wrote too fast, many things flashed by. If I were to write again, it would definitely be more exciting. I still have dreams. I still want to write what I want to write the most. I still think that I have endless potential that hasn't been tapped. I still think that I can still fight. I can't guarantee that every book can surpass the previous one, but I have been constantly working hard. I want to write a book that I think is a classic. So now I am here. The new book, once again dedicated in front of everyone. The children of the Feng family, once again fighting in the martial world. Feng Ling Tian is already here. Whether it is good or not, it is up to everyone to judge. This time I will do my best to create this book. Moreover, I also hope that brothers and sisters will create it with me. If you find any mistakes in the book, I hope that everyone will point them out in time so that I have a chance to correct them. The new book, I Am the Sovereign. It will be published today. The start of the new book urgently needs the support of brothers and sisters. The new book, like a weak child, needs the support of brothers and sisters to walk a journey. Each of your clicks, each of your recommendation votes, will be the motivation for me to move forward. There are many brothers who like to raise books. Reading more than tens of thousands of words is not enough. But I want to ask everyone, the new book needs a soil to grow. The results of the new book depend on everyone's hands. If we all raise books, the new book can't grow to hundreds of thousands or millions of words. Ao Shi's results were bad. I was desperately trying to catch up. It was not until a long time later that I heard from many brothers. In fact, at that time, it was not that they didn't like this book, but because they liked it so much, they wanted to save more to read together. If there were less, they were afraid that it would not be enough. In order to resist this temptation, some brothers and sisters even removed the book from the bookshelf. God knows when I saw them say so, how the psychological collapse. Because the results were too bad, I almost gave up that book. Sweat all over my head. So, I ask everyone, if you can still read this book, I hope that we can go all the way together, all the way to create, all the way to create, all the way, all the glory, all the way. I hope we can go through this storm together, all the way together. The new book has set sail. I hope that brothers and sisters on the page of the new book, leave your names. Let me see you, let me not be lonely. Finally, I wish everyone happy June 1st, Children's Day. In the end, I always feel that I am still a child who hasn't grown up. After all, it has only been 13,000 days. Finally, don't forget to vote every day. Chapter 2. Tianshan Continent. A mystical continent. Tianshan Continent had an endless forest, its vastness unknown, an endless ocean, its depth unknown, endless mystical beasts, unparalleled mountains. Tianshan Continent was vast and vast. Rumor had it that a ruler of heaven and earth had ascended from Tianshan Continent's predecessor. The eastern part of the Profound Sky Continent was the most orderly world in the entire Profound Sky Continent. There were 7 hegemonic powers and 5 nations in the middle. Even though there were endless wars, the common people lived in peace and contentment under their respective governance. The Empire of Dongxin, the Empire of Deyuan, the Empire of Yutong, the Empire of Tianxi, and the Empire of Ziyou. The story began from the Empire of Yutong in the east of Tianshan Continent. Ancient legend had it that when the 9 supremes were formed, the empire would be secure. 1,000 years of prosperity would be the foundation of all ages. Legend had it that there was a mystical 9 heavens domain that was made up of the stars and the power of Tao's will. It rotated with the stars, the cycle of the sun and moon, and could fall at any time. As long as it landed, it could create 9 people with astonishing talent. As long as the conditions of the 9 heavens domain were fulfilled, one could obtain the mysterious legacy and extraordinary power. When the 9 supremes were formed, it could boost the nation's fortune. In other words, any country that possessed the 9 heavens domain could become the continent's overlord. Of course, this was only a legend. Until that day, it was noon, the sky was clear and the sun was shining brightly. Suddenly the entire world was plunged into darkness. Looking up, one could see the twinkling stars. 9 bright rays of light fell from the night sky, dragging long tails behind them. They landed in the Empire of Yutong. When the 9 heavens domain fell, the 9 supremes would be formed. The Empire of Yutong would rule the world forever. This incident made the entire empire of Yutong a target. The continent's heroes were in a panic. A series of wars and catastrophes followed. The empire of Yutong was located in the middle of the eastern continent, rejecting Tianxi to the north and Deyuan to the south. It was connected to Ziyou to the west, Dongxian to the east, grasslands and deserts to the northeast and northwest respectively. The grassland tribes were as numerous as the stars in the sky, while the southwest and southeast were the tribes of the southern wilderness. The empire of Yutong was surrounded by enemies from all sides at this moment. In spite of this, the empire of Yutong did not give in. Regardless of the cost, the empire of Yutong was prepared to defend itself against any attack that came its way. After a series of bloody battles, the empire of Yutong would rather be destroyed than to hand over the Nine Heavens domain. The Nine Supremes were slowly taking shape. In the beginning, there were only 3 people who had each obtained the abilities of earth, water, and fire. Gradually there were 5 people, 6 people, 8 people. Finally, 3 years ago, the 9 Supremes of metal, wood, water, fire, earth, wind, lightning, and blood cloud were formed. The 9 mysterious men had become the strongest guardians of the empire of Yutong. Invincible and invincible. No one knew what their surnames were, no one knew what they looked like, and no one knew their family background. Everything was shrouded in mystery. To keep it a secret, even His Majesty did not know the true identity of the 9 Supremes. The 9 Supremes grew stronger and stronger, their might intimidating the world. However, a year ago when the 9 Supremes were secretly dispatched to carry out a mission, the news had somehow been leaked. Forces from various countries had gathered tens of thousands of elites and sent out countless experts, along with countless high-level mystical beasts, to ambush and kill the 9 Supremes at Tianshan Cliff. That battle was fought to the point where the heavens collapsed and the earth split apart, and the sun and moon lost their radiance. The 9 Supremes had been annihilated, no one had survived. Even the entire Tianshan Cliff was blasted into a pile of rubble. Upon hearing the news, the emperor of the empire of Yutong spat blood and fainted on the spot. Old Marshal Qiu Jianhan fell facing the sky, his life hanging by a thread. On the day of the 9 Supreme sacrifice, while the 9 Heavens domain still existed in the residence of 9 Supremes in the empire of Yutong, it was immediately sealed. A thick white fog enveloped the entire residence of 9 Supremes. No one could enter. It turned into a mysterious area. The empire of Yutong had once invited a grandmaster who was at the pinnacle of Tianshan continent's martial arts to come forth with high hopes. However, even the grandmaster was powerless against the 9 Heavens domain. He had tried to force his way in but suffered a backlash and was on the brink of death. With the fall of the 9 Supremes, the chaos of the entire Tianshan continent had finally arrived, and I created a few group numbers so that my brothers and sisters could join the group. There would be a place to chat and naturally a place to find me. Brothers and sisters, please take note, each person can only join one group. Otherwise, if all 3 groups had the same people, I would really cry. Feng Family Official Group. 376 is equal to 497 equals 379 Official Group 2. 374 is equal to 474 equals 820. Chapter 3. I like to use my brain, I like to solve things with wisdom. But when I can solve something with strength, I never use my brain. Yun Yang's quote. Let's not talk about wine, a man must draw his saber when he's in the world. Yun Yang recited slowly and raised his goblet to the air. A goblet of wine that was as red as blood fell into his stomach. His gaze was cold and deep. He was dressed in a deep purple robe, sitting quietly and lazily on a chair under the orchid stand in the courtyard. His gaze seemed to be on the orchids that covered half of the courtyard, but it also seemed to have penetrated the space of this world and landed in another realm. His facial features were like meticulously carved jade. His delicate eyebrows were curved and his deep pitch-black eyes were like 2 bottomless pools. His eyelids were not very clear, and his nose was straight and slightly tilted. His lips were small and not too thick. When he was not talking, he was like a rose that was about to bloom. His face was like a piece of exquisite, flawless jade. His long black hair was casually tied up on his head, strands of hair fluttering on both sides of his face and the back of his head. As the breeze caressed him, there was a sense of detachment from the mortal world, a sense of solitude. His entire face exuded the elegance of a woman. It could even be said that 99% of the women in this world would not have such exquisite facial features as his. However, such elegant facial features, when placed on his face, gave off a cold and austere feeling. He was like a cold god above the clouds, disdainful of all the joys and sorrows of the mortal world. Although his body was a little thin and his face was slightly pale, it added a strange, melancholic charm to him. Yun Yang seemed to like this saying very much, so he could not help repeating it again. Let's not talk about wine, a man must draw his saber when he's in the world. Finishing his words, he raised his goblet to the air again as if inviting someone, and drained it in one gulp. There was a deep sadness on his face, a deep pain flashing in the depth of his eyes. At this moment his gaze suddenly turned as sharp as a blade. The sharpness was fleeting, but the blooming orchids in front of him suddenly trembled and floated down, wilting before they even landed on the ground. Yun Yang's gaze dimmed after the sharp glare. He did not know when he would be able to recover his cultivation. There were too many things waiting for him to do, but there was not a drop of his cultivation left. Footsteps could be heard behind him. "Young master." An old man stood respectfully behind him. Yun Yang did not turn around. "Ame, what is it?" The old man stood up straight. Every time he stood behind his young master, there was always a sense of respect that came from the bottom of his heart. Although his young master had yet to recover from his serious injuries and had lost his cultivation base, he was so weak that it seemed like he could be blown away by a gust of wind. However, he gave off a feeling that no matter who it was, he was inviolable. This feeling was very strange. It seemed to come from nowhere, but it was real. "There are two things," Lao Mei said succinctly. The first incident was the military's sudden action. They raided the house of Wu Wenyuan, the imperial censor of the left, and the houses of a few officials from the censorate. It was said that old Marshal Qiu Jianhan had personally ordered for the military elites to be deployed. Wu Wenyuan's entire family was captured in one fell swoop and Wu Wenyuan was sent to the prison. Yun Yang did not speak, only listening. There was nothing strange about this incident. It was only the fall of a high official of the imperial court. In the empire of Yutong, such an incident was not worthy of Lao Mei's special report. He knew that there must be more to it. Lao Mei would definitely say it. Wu Wenyuan is someone we've been keeping an eye on for half a year. Therefore, when the house was raided, this old servant made some arrangements. In the end, we found that there was a secret chamber hidden in Wu Wenyuan's secret chamber. After the people who raided the house left, this old servant went there personally and retrieved the item hidden in the secret chamber. The military had captured an imperial court official. Lao Mei had been able to enter and find the secret chamber's secret under everyone's watchful eyes. He had even retrieved the item from the most heavily guarded place. However, Yun Yang was not at all surprised by this. Lao Mei said, there was a token, a jade pendant, a medicinal pill, and a beast core inside. Yun Yang frowned. Lao Mei quickly said, there are 7 words written on the token. A year's plan begins in spring. The jade pendant is carved with the words 10th of the first month. The medicinal pill is the life-replenishing pill from the Hall of Elixir, while the beast core is the mystical core of a 6th-level mystical beast, the green-headed eagle. Wu Wenyuan's crime is treason, suspected of involvement in the Battle of the 9 Supremes at Tianshan Cliff. Lao Mei finished. Yun Yang did not make a sound, but Lao Mei could clearly see that when he heard the words Tianshan Cliff, Yun Yang's body shuddered. Lao Mei could feel the temperature around him dropping continuously as a chill seeped out from the depths of his heart and permeated the small courtyard. Countless orchids suddenly fell without any wind. It was as if the entire courtyard was raining petals. After a long time, Yun Yang said, bring Wu Wenyuan here. I'll interrogate him myself. Wu Wenyuan was now in the Board of Punishment's prison. How could he bring him here? However, Lao Mei agreed without hesitation, yes. He then said, young master, I heard that the Board of Military wants to use the heads of Wu Wenyuan and the other traitors as a sacrifice to the 9 Supremes. Hearing the 2 words 9 Supremes, Yun Yang paled as if his heart had been stabbed with a knife. He twitched in pain and said, I know what I'm doing. Lao Mei replied, yes. What is the second matter? Asked Yun Yang. Yes, we're out of money. Lao Mei said awkwardly, we still have tens of thousands of silver taels left. I estimate that we can only last until tomorrow night. Yun Yang nodded and said, understood. Lunch is ready. Got it? Lao Mei had already retreated. A hint of ruthlessness slowly crept into Yun Yang's face. Yeah. A year's plan begins in spring. On the 10th day of the first month. Are you guys finally going to appear? A faint smile appeared on his face. However, if others were to see his current smile, they would definitely be shocked. This faint smile seemed to contain a murderous aura that could fill mountains of corpses and seas of blood. It was as if the gates of hell had opened and thousands of ghosts were coming out. At the dining table, it was a mountain of profound beast meat. A burst of fragrance assailed the nostrils. However, this amount was a little too much. At a rough estimate, There were at least 40 to 50 kilograms. Yunyang sighed and started eating. Lao Mei coughed and turned away. At this time of the day it was the last thing he wanted to see. His young master, who had always been as elegant and noble as a man from a painting, eating such a huge amount of meat alone. Although his young master's table manners were not ugly, on the contrary, they were filled with elegance. But there was a total of 56 kilograms of mystical beast meat. How much appetite did he have? Ever since his young master had returned a year ago, riddled with injuries, his appetite had suddenly become terrifying. It was jaw-dropping. A meal of mystical beast meat that was filled with spiritual qi had to be at least dozens of kilograms. A meal of mystical beast meat cost 8,000 silver taels. If this went on, he would not be able to sustain it. Moreover, there were other large expenses. What had happened to his young master? As he pondered, he heard his young master say, "Send invitations to Ma, Lu, Zhang, and Ling tonight. I will be hosting a banquet at Sky Inn." The corners of Lao Mei's mouth twitched as he said, "Yes." Behind him, Yunyang ate the last piece of mystical beast meat and tossed the Hall of Elixir's life-replenishing pill into his mouth. After some thought, he also tossed the 7th-level mystical beast's mystical pill into his mouth. Just these 2 items alone were priceless. 70% full. Yunyang said. Lao Mei's face twitched violently. An invitation card. It caused the young masters of the 7 families to howl in anger in the courtyards where they stayed. "I'm not going. I have no money. Whoever goes is a bastard. This bastard he's treating again. Oh my God, what should I do? Oh my God, please strike him down with lightning. This vampire. Whenever I have money, he'll treat me to a meal. Father, give me some money. Yunyang is treating again." *CK. As night fell, Yunyang went out. Lao Mei followed beside him, following his every step. In the twilight, Yunyang's robe seemed to be black, but it also seemed to be dark blue. As he walked, there was a faint iciness and alienation that belonged to the black, but there was also a hint of mystery in the dark blue. As his sleeves fluttered, a trace of elegant and noble dreamy purple shimmered faintly. He strolled along the street, elegant and suave. He walked very slowly, unable to exert any strength due to his internal injuries. Every step he took caused his internal organs to ache as if they were on fire. However, there was a faint smile on his face. It was as if this bone-piercing pain could make him remember something, to remember something. Only then would he feel better. Lao Mei followed behind him, looking at his young master's back, but he could clearly feel a sense of alienation and loneliness that did not belong to this worldly realm. Sky Inn. The most luxurious inn in the empire of Yutang's capital city, Tiantang City. Now the people in the inn were rather surprised. There were 7 young masters dressed lavishly in the lobby. All 7 of them were frequent customers of this Sky Inn. Every time they came, they were beaming with pride and arrogance. However, now, the 7 young masters dressed lavishly looked resentful, sighing as if they were mourning the death of their parents. A few of them were still cursing and swearing. They were full of indignation and indignation. What was going on? Just as they were wondering, a silhouette flashed by the door. A silhouette was already standing at the door. When the lanterns were lit, the light shone on this person's face. Everyone's eyes lit up. The light shone on half of his face, giving off a breathtaking feeling of such a character is rare in this world. The waitresses lowered their heads at the same time. Their beautiful eyes glowed with brilliance, and they felt as if their hearts were beating wildly. Their faces immediately turned crimson. This young master is really handsome. If only I could. The silhouette at the door was strolling in slowly. As he walked, his dark purple robe that was almost black blue spilled out a regal and dreamy aura. "Ah, all my good friends are here indeed. How gracious." Yunyang smiled gracefully. Please come in and have a seat. We haven't seen each other for a long time. This time let's have a good drink." One of the young masters gritted his teeth and said, "Young Master Yun, we won't be drinking wine. Just say it, how much do you want this time?" Yunyang smiled gracefully and tilted his head slightly, speaking amicably, "Why? Young Master Ma, are you not giving me face? You don't even want to drink a cup of wine?" Young Master Ma paled and said quickly, "No, I didn't say that. Who dares not give young Master Yun face?" Ah. As he spoke, he signaled the others with his eyes. Yes, young Master Yun's face is more important than the heavens. This glass of wine must be drunk." The young masters nodded their heads repeatedly with forced smiles on their faces. Their laughter was like the laughter of ducks strangled by their necks, dry and suffocating and unpleasant to hear. Yunyang smiled gently. "If that's the case, please. Please? The young masters responded enthusiastically and walked up the stairs harmoniously. As they turned around, their faces were twisted as if they were about to cry. Good heavens! They actually wanted to drink wine this time. They had never been treated so well in the past. However, they did not know how much this glass of wine was worth. Lao Mei stood behind Yun Yang, not saying a word or moving a muscle, his face expressionless. Once upon a time there was a rabbit who got drunk one day and actually killed a bear. Yun Yang told a joke in a light tone. It was not funny, but the 7 young masters laughed as if they had heard the funniest joke in the world. Young Master Yun's joke is superb. I shall live on this joke for the next half a year. I think I'll laugh whenever I think about it for the next year. I'm dying of laughter, my stomach hurts. Yun Yang nodded with a smile. Looks like everyone welcomes me very much. Of course. Young Master Zhang said quickly, if someone doesn't welcome someone like young Master Yun, that would really be unappreciative. The young masters nodded like chickens pecking at grains. Yes. Whoever doesn't welcome young Master Yun is a bastard. They looked at each other and thought to themselves, Motherf asterisk Kerr, all 6 of them are bastards. Me too. Whoever would welcome this guy is the real bastard. After 3 rounds of wine and 5 courses of food, Yun Yang coughed and said, since all my brothers are here, I have something to say. I'm a little embarrassed. Young Master Ma said as if he was about to cry, please speak, young Master Yun. Since everyone welcomes me so much, I'll be straightforward. Yun Yang smiled sheepishly and said, money has been a little tight recently, so I've asked my brothers to think of something. The 7 young masters' faces turned bitter at the same time. I wonder how much young Master Yun needs? Yun Yang looked at the dishes on the table and sighed, today's meal is not cheap. Before he could finish, young Master Qin had already interjected. It's just a meal, how can we let young Master Yun spend money? Let me. Yun Yang nodded. Young Master Qin is indeed righteous. It would be impolite to refuse. Young Master Qin looked bitter. Not at all, we're all brothers. Yes, I told a joke before the meal. Everyone thinks that it can sustain a year of happiness. Yun Yang said, actually, I don't need much this time. 7 million silver taels, I think, will be enough to sustain the brothers until the next joke. The 7 young masters' faces were ashen. 7 million silver taels? 1 million each? What kind of joke would be worth so much? Young Master Ma said with a bitter face, young Master Yun, it's not that I don't want to take it, but now, the family's business is suffering losses, it's not good in all aspects. Before he could finish, Yun Yang looked up and smiled at him, saying, you take 2 million. Young Master Ma's expression froze. This, 2 million is too little? Yun Yang said, then 3, not at all. Young Master Ma cut him off quickly with a bitter face, 2 million it is, it's a deal. Young Master Yun, let me toast to you. He raised the goblet and downed it in one go. When the wine entered his mouth, it tasted like gold thread. He felt like an idiot. 1 million it was, why did he have to say so much? The other 6 looked at young Master Ma sympathetically, gloating at his misfortune. Serves you right. Who asked you to talk too much? I like friends like young Master Ma. Forthright, loyal, and bright. Yun Yang said admiringly, who would complain about having too many friends like this? Young Master Ma looked like he had just eaten feces. The other 6 young masters looked equally amused. Then the other 6 brothers, I'm sure you don't think 1 million is too little? Yun Yang asked with a smile. Not at all. The 7 young masters felt like crying. Today's joke was really expensive. They had known that they would have to spend a lot of money this time, but they had never expected it to be so much crueler than the previous times. Chapter 4. Yun Yang returned with a fruitful journey. Yun Che walked out of the restaurant with a radiant smile on his face. The 7 young masters sent him off with pale faces. Take care, young Master Yun. Let's meet again next time. It was only when they could no longer see Yun Yang that the 7 of them heaved a sigh of relief. Eat as much as you can. Young Master Ma gritted his teeth and tears rolled down his face. How can I eat to get back the 2 million? The other 6 young masters rolled their eyes, feeling a little pleased in their hearts. I may be unlucky, but there's someone even more unlucky than me. Thinking of this, he actually became excited. Come. We won't go home until we're drunk tonight. Boss, serve another 100 dishes. Motherf asterisk her, I'm going to get my money back. Like a swarm of bees they returned. Young Master Qin, who had snatched the right to treat them, turned pale. He was both angry and anxious. F*** all of you. Get the F*** out of here. He hurriedly chased after them to stop them. Lao Mei's arms were filled with silver notes as he followed behind Yun Yang. The doubts in his mind were more than the banknotes in his bosom. Which one of these 7 young masters wasn't arrogant and domineering? Which one of them was not a lawless person? How could he be so obedient? Just this year alone he had already been blackmailed by the young master twice, not to mention before. What blackmail does the young master have on them? Scatter 6 million in a few directions as you see fit. Yun Yang instructed as he walked. You know what you should pay attention to. Lao Mei replied seriously, Don't worry, young master. I understand. Yun Yang nodded. As they spoke, they had already arrived at the entrance of the residence of Yun. Yun Yang lifted his head and looked at the 4 words on the plaque. He smiled bitterly and strode in. The clouds in the sky. 4 glittering golden words appeared at the entrance of the residence of Yun. It was handwritten by His Majesty the current emperor, a gesture of utmost respect to Marquis Yun, who was like a divine dragon. The door slowly closed. Outside, a person's voice came from afar. Yutang's 9 supremes, heroes of the world. The nation mourns, send my spirit. The 9th of the 3rd month, before the hall of valiant souls. Behead the wicked, offer sacrifice to my spirit. My spirit lives on, my spirit lives on forever. Countless people had solemn expressions on their faces. There were officials, military generals, soldiers and commoners. The tide of people rushed to the various flower, incense and candles shops. All the incense and candles in Tiantang City were sold out that afternoon. The faint sound of crying could be heard. Today was March 8th. Tomorrow, they would hold a memorial ceremony for the heroic spirits. Inside the residence of Yun, Yun Yang leaned against the door, listening to the repeated cries from outside. His face was etched with a pained expression of longing. The 9 supremes will always be here. Yun Yang spoke silently, his gaze determined. Because I'm still here. Residence of Yun. In the secret chamber. Yun Yang was dressed in a purple robe, standing with his arms behind his back. Looking at Wu Wenyuan, who stood before him, a hint of blood flashed across his eyes as he spoke softly. Censor Wu, I've long heard of your name. It's a pity that I haven't been able to meet you. That's why I've invited Sir Wu here today. Let us have a good chat. Opposite him, Wu Wenyuan, who was dressed in a prisoner's uniform, chuckled softly. Young Master Yun, I had only thought that you were the young master of the Marquis of Heavenly Clouds and did not take you seriously. I didn't expect young Master Yun to be such an enigmatic character in the Empire of Yutang. I've really misjudged you. He chuckled. To be able to bring me here so easily from the prison, young Master Yun's means are truly remarkable. Yun Yang looked at the censor of the left. Not a hint of nervousness or fear could be seen in his eyes. This was a man of sacrifice. Yun Yang came to a conclusion in his heart and smiled faintly. It's just a small trick. I've embarrassed myself in front of Sir Wu. Wu Wenyuan said calmly, I wonder what young Master Yun wishes to talk to me about, bringing me here from the prison? Yun Yang smiled nonchalantly, I would like to play a game with Sir Wu. What game? Wu Wenyuan asked. Questions. Yun Yang laughed. You ask me a question and I'll ask you a question. Wu Wenyuan laughed as well. I'll ask you anything if I ask you a question. However, if you ask me a question I might not be willing to answer. Yun Yang smiled and said gently, From what I know, Sir Wu's entire family has been captured this time. Including your old mother, your wife, your 2 concubines, your 3 sons and 1 daughter. Wu Wenyuan's gaze turned cold. What are you trying to say? Yun Yang said gently, Sir Wu has already disregarded life and death. Of course you don't care about anything. However, I don't think Sir Wu can ignore the lives of your family, can you? Wu Wenyuan's gaze wavered. What do you mean? Yun Yang said faintly, I'll ask you the first question. If you answer it I can let you die a quick death. This is the first benefit. Wu Wenyuan said mockingly, If I don't want to answer a single question, will you let me live? Yun Yang tilted his neck slightly and said, Death depends on how you die. Sir Wu understands. If you don't answer a single question, none of your family members will live. As for you, Sir Wu, you'll have to live a long life here with me. He smiled slightly, revealing his pearly white teeth. Sir Wu, what do you think? Wu Wenyuan could not help shuddering despite facing death with equanimity. Live a long life. The words were filled with auspicious meaning, but when uttered by Yun Yang, they were filled with eeriness and terror. Of course, Wu Wenyuan knew how he would live a long life. He was silent for a moment before he said, You mean that my family members can still live? Yun Yang said, Of course. Let me ask you the second question. After you answer it, I can guarantee that your wife can live. The third question, your mother can live. The fourth question, your daughter can live. The fifth question, your second son whom you dislike the most can live. The last question, other than you, your entire family can live and live freely. Wu Wenyuan closed his eyes in agony. What if I don't answer one of the questions? Yun Yang said nonchalantly, for example, the fourth question. If you don't answer it, I'll let your daughter live as well. However, she'll live in a brothel. Every customer will know that she's Sir Wu's daughter. Yes, each question corresponds to a person. Wu Wenyuan's eyes widened, his eyes almost popping out of their sockets. You're ruthless. Yin Yang smiled. I'm not ruthless, Sir Wu is. It's because of your lack of cooperation that such a tragedy has happened. On the contrary, as a son, a husband, and a father, you can create a better living environment for them. Wu Wenyuan closed his eyes, his heart filled with despair. The unflinching fear of death that had filled his heart had vanished without a trace. Yun Yang's words had hit him where it hurt. Young Master Yun is indeed young Master Yun? Wu Wenyuan smiled sadly. What do you want to know? Yun Yang placed his arms behind his back and said softly, the first question, a year's plan starts in spring. This is a good saying, but I'd like Sir Wu to explain the meaning behind it. Wu Wenyuan's face was ashen, his gaze struggling for a long time before he said, this is the 4 Seasons Tower, 4 seasons in a year. This means that the Hall of Spring should act. Yun Yang nodded. Very well. As a reward for answering, you can die now. The second question, what does the 10th of the first month mean? I am the 10th of the first month. Wu Wenyuan closed his eyes and said weakly, there are 3 halls in the 4 Seasons Tower in every season. Each hall is named after a month, and there are 30 people in each hall from the first day to the 30th. Congratulations, your wife is alive. Yun Yang said with a smile. The third question. Who is Mr. Nian? Wu Wenyuan looked into Yun Yang's eyes and said, I don't know. Yun Yang frowned and looked into his eyes for a long time before he said, all right, another question. Who is the Hall Master of the Hall of Spring? I don't know either. Wu Wenyuan smiled sadly. You really don't have to ask this question anymore. Between us, it's a one-way communication, we don't know who each other is. I don't even know who the 9th and 11th of the first month are. What more the Hall Master? Yun Yang exhaled, his expression turning much uglier. A left imperial censor of the imperial court, only 1 day in the 4 seasons of the year without any duties. The 4 Seasons Tower is a colossus. Yun Yang chuckled. The chilliness in his chuckle made Wu Wenyuan shudder involuntarily. Since you don't know anything, Yun Yang said with a frown, then who were the participants in the ambush of the 9 Supremes at Tianshan Cliff last spring? Hearing the words ambush of the 9 Supremes at Tianshan Cliff, Wu Wenyuan's facial muscles twitched involuntarily. He said, I'm only a mole. The actual execution of the plan was handled by the Hall of Spring's Chief Hall Master. I don't know who the participants were. Yin Yang nodded. Other than you, there must be a mole? Does it belong to the military? Wu Wenyuan said, the 9th and 11th who contacted me felt like they were military generals, but I don't know their specific identities so I can't be sure. Yin Yang said, all right. I'm done with my questions. If you have any, you can ask me. Wu Wenyuan shuddered and said loudly, why are you only asking these few questions? Since you're asking about the incident at Tianshan Cliff, you should have a lot more to ask. Yun Yang said coldly, because I know all the other questions. Besides, if I continue to ask and you answer, I'll have to let your son go, but I'm not willing to let him go. Wu Wenyuan was enraged as he cried out hoarsely, but you've already asked me 4 questions. Yun Yang said faintly, because you didn't answer the last 2 questions. In other words, you've answered 1. Overall, you've answered a total of 3 of my questions. The first question will grant you a quick death. The answer to the second question will allow your wife to live. The third question will spare your mother's life. Don't worry, I'll do it. Wu Wenyuan's body went limp at once, despair filling his heart. This person had raised hope in him by asking questions as a bet, but he had suddenly cut it off at the most crucial moment. He had caused the most important person to not be able to live. Looking at Yun Yang's cold expression, he suddenly asked, who are you really? Yun Yang's face was filled with extreme sorrow, his gaze fixed on the void as he slowly enunciated each word, I am Supreme Cloud. I am Supreme Cloud. Ever since the last battle, he had returned to Tiantang City, both physically and mentally scarred. Every time he thought of his identity, he felt an extreme sense of sorrow and bitterness. After a year he could finally say these 4 words. Because I've found the first clue. At last I can, when I think of my brothers, have a little comfort. Wu Wenyuan's face was filled with shock as he stared at Yun Yang, speechless. The intense shock had almost robbed him of his ability to speak. Yun Yang continued to speak word by word. I am Supreme Cloud of the Nine Supremes. You're not dead? Wu Wenyuan cried hoarsely, you're obviously dead. A strange expression appeared on Yun Yang's face as his voice was filled with endless sorrow. The Nine Supremes will never die. Wu Wenyuan chuckled bitterly and said dejectedly, I see, you're not dead. He mumbled the words a few times like a walking corpse. Even his eyes had lost their light. Suddenly he chuckled bitterly, I can't believe that the soul of the Nine Supremes isn't dead yet. Is this heaven's will? Yun Yang's expression was cold, but his gaze was as deep as the ocean. No one would be able to tell from his gaze what kind of turbulent waves were raging in his heart. The clouds hang in the sky, the winds sweep the earth, the thunder rumbles, the firmament is frozen. Wu Wenyuan murmured, the golden light shines, the earth dragon soars, the wood that soars to the heavens, undefeatable. The prairie fire, the water vanishes, the blood of the hero is eternal. There's still someone alive in the Nine Supremes. Listening to these words, Yun Yang's eyes were suddenly ablaze with fire. He murmured softly, that's right, I'm still alive. Since I'm still alive, then countless people must die. Everyone who's involved in the Tianshan Cliff incident must die. The blood debt of so many of my brothers. Yun Yang lowered his head to look at Wu Wenyuan in front of him and said softly, you're the first? The crimson hue in his eyes suddenly burned like a flame. Chapter 5. Looking at Wu Wenyuan's headless corpse lying quietly on the ground, fresh blood flowing, Yun Yang was deep in thought. Right at this moment, his expression suddenly changed. This was because, at that instant he felt a strange aura suddenly appearing out of nowhere and entering his body. It seemed to be an aura that only appeared after Wu Wenyuan's death. The feeling was obvious. His Dantian Sea of Qi that had been dried up since he was severely injured a year ago actually felt like it was being revived. Yun Yang's gaze shifted as he tried to manipulate his mystical Qi. He felt a strand of air rise abruptly and pass through his meridians that were almost completely destroyed. Yun Yang's eyes lit up. There was hope for his ability to recover. Although he did not understand what was going on, Yun Yang was already satisfied with this conclusion. You answered a few of my questions. Yun Yang looked at Wu Wenyuan's corpse and said softly, I won't go back on my word. Although you've betrayed the country, although you're guilty of many crimes, what I've promised you is unchangeable. Because this is the Nine Supremes' promise. Yun Yang walked out with his arms behind his back. Send the corpse and head back to the prison. Also, rescue Wu Wenyuan's wife and mother and let them go. By the time the last word left his mouth, Yun Yang had already disappeared. Lao Mei appeared like a phantom. When Yun Yang returned to the pergola, the moon was already high in the sky, shining brightly. He looked at the bright moon in the sky quietly, a sorrowful smile suddenly appearing on his face. Brothers, I know who they are. The Four Seasons Tower. Mr. Nian is the head of the Four Seasons Tower. 4 seasons in a year, 12 months, 360 days. It represents 360 people. There's hope for my ability to recover. Don't worry. I'll live well. Yun Yang repeated the words in his heart, feeling the pain and bitterness in his heart surge like a tsunami, causing his hands to tremble. After a long time, Yun Yang exhaled softly. Under the bright moonlight, there was a faint tint of blood. Just as he was about to stand up, the weak strand of profound qi in his dantian began to circulate through his meridians with great difficulty. Ordinary martial artists could circulate their qi through their meridians several times in a single breath, and they were the lowest level martial artists. In spite of this, Yun Yang's circulation had taken 2 hours. The degree of blockage in his meridians was evident. But this was already an unprecedented improvement over the past year. Just as he completed the first circulation, Yun Yang could only feel a loud bang in his head, almost shattering his soul with a loud boom. Suddenly, the world around him spun and his body swayed. He spat out a mouthful of blood. His body went limp and he fell to the ground unconscious. Lao Mei, who had rushed over in shock, was just about to help Yun Yang up when he was shocked to see a green glow radiating from Yun Yang's body. It was filled with the air of life. Lao Mei was shocked by the powerful life force. He stretched out his hand to help Yun Yang up, but he was suddenly shaken. The green glow on Yun Yang's body intensified. Lao Mei shrieked in shock as he felt an unparalleled force coming at him. He flew through the air and floated a few hundred feet to the front door of the residence of Yun before slamming into the door with a loud crash. For a moment he felt weak in his muscles and bones, unable to stand up. He felt as if his internal organs were about to shatter, and his bones were about to fall apart. Lao Mei's eyes almost popped out of their sockets. What was happening? Even if his cultivation base was not in the top 3 among the known experts in Tiantang City, it was definitely in the top 5. He had actually been flung hundreds of feet away without any resistance after being touched by such a gentle green glow. This was absolutely horrifying. He forced himself up and looked again, only to see that the green glow on his young master had disappeared. Lao Mei rubbed his eyes and looked again, but there was still nothing out of the ordinary. He tried to help his young master up, but there was no obstruction. There was nothing out of the ordinary. This is really strange. Lao Mei mumbled to himself, did I fall just now? Did I have nothing better to do so I threw myself half to death for fun? Yun Yang felt as if he had entered a strange and bizarre world. There was a green sun-like object spinning in the sky, giving him an immense sense of comfort. Even his soul was moaning in contentment. Then, his consciousness suddenly left this strange space and returned to his body. The stench almost made Yun Yang retch. Only then did he realize that he was lying on the bed. The entire room was filled with a stench that could suffocate the entire world. *CKME. Yun Yang got up quickly and rushed out. The stench did not diminish, only then did he realize that the stench was coming from his body. The surface of his skin was actually covered with a layer of sticky substance. It was even in his nostrils. Yun Yang held his breath and sprinted out, jumping directly into the fish pond in the courtyard. Poof! Water splashed everywhere. Then a pair of terrified eyes appeared in front of Yun Yang. Lao Mei. Lao Mei was already in the pond, unbeknownst to him. Lao Mei was helpless as well. He was supposed to be serving Yun Yang, but when the stench on Yun Yang grew stronger, Lao Mei could no longer hold it in. Seeing that Yun Yang was not in danger, he jumped out and ran away. There was no place in the entire courtyard that did not stink. Helpless, Lao Mei could only dive into the water. However, he did not expect the source of the stench to follow as well. Lao Mei was on the verge of tears. This old man had roamed the martial world for so many years and had rolled back and forth between life and death thousands of times, but he had never smelled such a stench. Countless strong enemies couldn't make me retreat, but this stench made me flee. The worst thing was, no matter where I ran, the stench followed me like a parasite. I couldn't get rid of it. I broke down. Lao Mei's eyes rolled back and he fainted. Yun Yang only cared about scrubbing the sticky substance off his body, until, when he opened his eyes, all the fish in the pond had floated up with their white bellies up. Yun Yang was speechless. Finally, he had washed himself clean. After more than 2 hours, the stench had finally dissipated. Yun Yang felt drained of energy. The eastern morning light had already begun to brighten. Yun Yang laid in the fish pond, not wanting to move. Young master, your skin? Lao Mei finally snapped out of his daze and turned to look at Yun Yang. He was suddenly dumbfounded. After a long while, he bit his tongue harshly and said in disbelief, "This is the innate golden jade physique?" Yun Yang's face was smooth like a flawless piece of jade, white with a tinge of pink, filled with a crystalline texture. He looked as if he was about to glow. Yun Yang was already handsome enough, but there were still some scars on his face. They were the scars left behind by years of battles, especially the battle of life and death a year ago, which had left an indelible mark on Yun Yang. Now, however, they were all gone. Meridian cleansing. Innate golden jade physique. This was the only thought in Lao Mei's mind now. What had happened to young master? How could there suddenly be a phenomenon that would make all the martial artists in the world jealous and envious? Yun Yang cultivated to check his body. After a long while, a hint of joy appeared on his face. Other than the fact that his cultivation base had yet to recover, his body was as healthy as a newborn baby's. It was even more flawless. As long as my meridians recover, my cultivation base is only a matter of time. Yun Yang was very satisfied with his current situation. Even he himself did not know how all of this had happened. However, Yun Yang's mind was steady. Since it had happened, there had to be a reason. Although he could not find it for now, he would definitely find it. What he needed to do now was to recover his strength. Since the tragic battle a year ago, Yun Yang had not experienced the feeling of power for a whole year. Suddenly Yun Yang's gaze froze. How come the cold ice jade on his wrist that he used to have was gone? Finally he was done cleaning himself. Facing Lao Mei's strange gaze, Yun Yang returned to his room as if nothing had happened. He changed everything on his bed and lay down comfortably before he began to search for the reason. His deific consciousness entered his sea of consciousness and saw a thick white fog. Within the white fog, a lotus seed that was emitting countless rays of golden light was spinning slowly. At the very next moment, The lotus seed was covered in a greenish hue and suddenly, an exotic fragrance assaulted his nostrils. The lotus seed had actually split open from the top. A thin and tender green sprout quietly drilled out. It was a fresh emerald green, like a transparent jade. One look at it would make one feel refreshed. The tender sprout swayed as waves of mystical energy slowly emanated from it. What was this? At this moment Yun-Yang felt a wave of dizziness. It was as if there was an endless amount of information burrowing into his mind. At this moment, his head almost exploded on the spot. Yun-Yang almost fainted from the excruciating pain. Vaguely, it was as if a line of golden words appeared in his mind. It was as if it had come from the end of the universe and had spun to his eyes. Chaos is endless, Tao is one. Something is born out of nothing, it is endless. Absorbing the air of injustice in the world, relieving the endless grievances of the living, Tao moves forward with a clear conscience. Although the heart of the lotus is bitter, it is the foundation of reproduction. The mind is a blade, all evil shall be repelled. Slaying the evil and slaughtering the spirits, the lotus seed sprouts. Illuminating the universe, the dust disperses and gives birth to light. Endless divine art. A mystical thought suddenly appeared at this moment. Yin-Yang closed his eyes. After a long time, he slowly opened them, a look of understanding in his eyes. I see, I finally understand. Yin-Yang's eyes were filled with understanding. Suddenly, his meridians and marrow were cleansed. Then such a magical thing appeared in his subconscious. He understood now, but his expression was even more pained. If only I had known earlier, if only I had appeared earlier, how could my brothers have died? It turns out that in the fierce battle at Tianshan Cliff, I did not die in the end and crawled out from the pile of corpses because of this. I have suffered 17 fatal wounds, but I am still alive because of this. It was a tiny lotus seed. Yun-Yang closed his eyes, thoughts tumbling in his mind. The situation of that day appeared before him again. That day he had just joined the 9 Supremes and had just gone through 3 battles. Suddenly something fell from nowhere and smashed into his head. He had fainted on the spot. It was his 8 brothers who had saved him. Afterwards, he realized that it was a lotus seed that had smashed into him. A tiny lotus seed. And it was embedded in his head. This incident had made him the biggest joke among his brothers. The youngest of the 9 Supremes has actually been smashed into a coma by a lotus seed. Ah! His brother's laughter was still echoing in his ears. Yun-Yang was embarrassed and angry at the same time. He plucked the lotus seed from his head and was about to smash it when the Venerable laughed and said, "Oh Ninth, keep this thing. Anything can happen on the battlefield. Keep it to remind yourself to be careful of all accidents. You should know that even a lotus seed can knock out the 9 Supremes." Everyone laughed hysterically, but he had really accepted his eldest brother's suggestion and kept the lotus seed. He tied a rope with ice silk and hung it around his neck. When he had nothing to do, he would take it out to have a look. After all, even a lotus seed could knock him out, what about other things? Since then he had indeed become more and more careful. From the beginning he had slowly become the core of the 9 Supremes, the brains. Even the eldest brother had said that OL Ninth had grown up since he had been knocked out by the lotus seed. Although everyone laughed every time he said it, after saying it a few times, the brothers no longer joked about it anymore. This was because Yun-Yang's meticulous thinking and meticulous planning had won the respect and approval of the brothers from the bottom of their hearts. The brothers had even generally thought that as long as Yun-Yang could continue to grow, he would definitely become one of the most terrifying figures in the entire Tianshan continent. Yun-Yang himself could feel that the vigilance that this lotus seed had brought to him had indeed improved him a lot. Therefore he cherished it even more. He was even more reluctant to take it off. Yun-Yang had even sworn in his heart, "When the world is at peace and I retire, I will use all means to bring this lotus seed to life, build a large pond for it, let it take root and germinate in the pond, and multiply into a lake of lotus flowers. He would then build a hut beside it and live the rest of his life in peace." This was the lotus seed in his subconscious now. And now, this lotus seed had already sprouted in his sea of consciousness. Moreover, for some reason, the name of this lotus seed had naturally popped up in his mind. Chapter 6. A living lotus was growing in his sea of consciousness. What an amazing thing. There's actually such an amazing thing in this world. Yin-Yang was shocked. He was sure that such a thing had never happened in the entire Tianshan continent. Because this was something that simply couldn't happen. But it had actually happened to him. To me, it could be a calamity where I'll be controlled and become some devil, or it could be an immortal opportunity that will make me invincible in this world. Yun-Yang was very calm about this unexpected event. He was very clear that there must be a reason behind the abnormality. Since it had happened to him, it was either a blessing or a curse. Whether it's a blessing or a curse, I can accept it calmly. A smile hung on Yun Yang's jade-like face. As long as I can fulfill my brother's unfulfilled wish and avenge this blood feud, I can enjoy the blessings and shoulder the misfortunes. A trace of nostalgia appeared on Yun Yang's face. The pitiful mystical qi in his body began to flow according to the route of the endless divine art. This was a brand new route. However, Yun Yang was not at all impatient. Just as it began, Yun Yang felt a prickling pain. Even with his endurance, he could not help but moan softly. With every inch that the endless divine art advanced, the excruciating pain was like 10,000 tiny knives stirring in Yun Yang's bones. Yun Yang breathed heavily, sweat dripping from his forehead. However, he did not stop and continued to circulate it at full force. Go through. Go through. No matter how painful it was, could it be more painful than my heart? Pain was living. It was hope. Yun Yang's consciousness was blurred by the pain. However, the weak force was still moving forward in Yun Yang's meridians with great difficulty. After an unknown amount of time, all of a sudden, he felt a sudden tremor in his body. The lotus bud in his sea of consciousness seemed to sway, and there was a sharp pain on his head. The next moment there was a loud boom. It was as if some barrier had been opened. Then, the spiritual qi in his body seemed to have found a new exit, surging out. A cycle was completed. Above Yun Yang's head, he could clearly feel waves of spiritual qi entering through the top of his head as he cultivated. Through the top. Chakra breakthrough. Yun Yang's eyes widened. At this moment, he almost fainted from the joy. In that instant, he felt that even if it was 100 times more painful, it would still be worth it. This endless divine art actually had such an earth-shattering effect. This, as one of the 9 Supremes who had once been a superb expert, how could Yun Yang not know the difficulty of breaking through chakras? In this world, not everyone had the aptitude to cultivate. However, not everyone with the aptitude to cultivate could become an expert. The so-called innate talent was real. In the world of practitioners in the profound sky continent, this kind of ranking was even harsher. There were 12 mountains of merit, and each mountain represented a layer of heaven. The acupoints that martial artists cultivated were the tailbone acupoint, Qihai acupoint, perineum acupoint, Mingmen acupoint, crimson palace acupoint, Jiaji acupoint, parietal acupoint, mind acupoint, and spirit acupoint. A martial artist's cultivation was divided into 3 types. Low-level vitality martial artists, middle-level spirit martial artists, and high-level profound qi martial artists. Of course, there were higher ones, but they were as rare as phoenix feathers and unicorn horns. They were rarely seen in 100 years. Vitality martial artists. Born without awakening chakras or innately awakened 1 or 2 chakras. At most, they could awaken Sea of Qi and Mingmen chakras. These martial artists trained their muscles and bones to increase their strength, overdrawing on the human body's potential to obtain power. Overdrawing one's own qi of vitality to cultivate was called vitality. No matter how hard these martial artists worked, their lifetime achievements were bound to be limited. Spiritual qi martial artists. They could be said to be inner force martial artists. They had 3 innately awakened chakras. They had the power of yin within them and could release it to harm others. Meditating could absorb the spiritual qi of heaven and earth and gather it in the Dantian Sea of Qi. Those with a profound cultivation base could crack rocks and unleash their acquired strength to the extreme. This was the so-called spirit. Mystical qi martial artists had 6 awakened chakras, the spirit of heaven and earth. They could tread on rivers and seas and touch the heavens. They were innate masters. When their cultivation base reached its peak, they could melt gold and iron, climb mountains and wade rivers as if they were walking on flat ground. They could come and go without a trace. This was the mystical. This was the mystical. Yin Yang had 6 innately awakened chakras. In the profound sky continent, he was definitely one of the prodigies. However, it was precisely because of this that he knew the difficulty of breaking through chakras. Well, it wasn't difficult, it was absolutely impossible. The number of awakened chakras in a person was not something that could be achieved through hard work. It was completely innate. If one was born without any chakras, then it was hopeless for the rest of his life. This was the so-called innate talent. Yun Yang's 6 innately awakened chakras were the tailbone chakra, Qihai chakra, perineum chakra, Mingmen chakra, crimson palace chakra, and Jiaji chakra. This was his innate physique. Initially, he had thought that he would at most become an expert in this life, and had no hope of reaching the legendary level. But never in his dreams did he expect that after cultivating the endless divine art, He could actually open another chakra in such a short period of time. Crown chakra. This was something that was absolutely impossible and had never been recorded before, but it had actually happened to him so miraculously. Now Yun-Yang's 7 chakras were awakened. There were not many people in the history of the Empire of Yutong who could achieve this. It was only a difference of 1 chakra, but compared to Yun-Yang's previous physique, it could be described as a world of difference. He was now in the clouds. He had been under the soil before. The endless divine art had only reached this point, but Yun-Yang could already feel that it lived up to its name as the heaven and earth divine art. As he cultivated, his innate talent could be enhanced. This was the work of a deity. In addition, the power of the mystical chi now was a world of difference compared to before. Yun-Yang could clearly feel that if the mystical chi before was hemp rope, then the mystical chi now was natural silk. It was such an analogy and difference. As the crown chakra was opened, the surging spiritual chi of heaven and earth surged in. Yun-Yang's cultivation method continued to circulate. Countless stains slowly seeped out from every pore of his body. It was a cleansing of tendons and marrow. It was a true cleansing of tendons and marrow. Yun-Yang's thoughts spun, but the endless divine art did not stop its circulation. What Yun-Yang did not know was that, up in the sky, the spiritual energy from all directions seemed to have encountered a black hole, and it kept gathering, surging and surging, wave after wave. In the surroundings, a few cultivators who were cultivating were suddenly startled awake. Because at this moment, they realized that the amount of spiritual chi they could absorb was so minuscule that it was almost non-existent. What was going on? Swoosh, swoosh, swoosh. One after another, figures appeared on the roofs. They looked around and sensed the unusual movements of the spiritual chi in the surroundings. They were at a loss. Everyone looked at each other, seeing the extreme shock in each other's eyes. Which Grandmaster has actually come to Tiantang City? The spiritual chi of heaven and earth is at my disposal, suffocating within 100 miles, the realm of Grandmaster. Only the legendary peerless Grandmasters would have such an aura when they were cultivating. But how many of these Grandmasters were there in the entire profound sky continent? Now, one had actually appeared in Tiantang City? What did this mean? What did this Grandmaster want to do? In the direction of the Imperial City. A silhouette appeared abruptly in the sky, his eyes filled with shock as he stared in the southwest direction where the powerful aura was coming from, bewildered. Which super expert has come? Another silhouette soared into the sky and landed beside him, his expression solemn. Both of them looked at each other, seeing the shock in each other's eyes. Very powerful. But I can't figure out the direction of the aura. It's strange. Nonsense, with your weak cultivation base, you want to figure out the cause and effect of such an existence. Who has come? The first person smiled bitterly. No matter who it is, it's someone we can't afford to offend. In Yun-Yang's subconscious, the tiny green lotus bud was trembling as if it was growing bigger bit by bit. A wave of pure vitality slowly emanated from it. It emanated from the ground, from the top of the sky, and shot up to the sky, where it could not be seen by the naked eye. All the plants in the entire Tianshan continent welcomed a frenzied growth at this moment. In just one night, it was as if the world had changed. The entire human world seemed to have changed completely. My amethyst ginseng, why did it bloom in one night? Somewhere, an elder looked at his yard in surprise. The amethyst ginseng that had bloomed in the spiritual gathering formation was filled with a fragrant aroma. He was baffled. The amethyst ginseng had been carefully taken care of by him for 20 years and there had never been any change, let alone a flower. Now, however, the elder almost thought that the amethyst ginseng before him had been replaced. In the endless forest. A few people who had just woken up looked at the scene around them, dumbfounded. Last night, everyone had been worried that there would be a beast attack, so after some effort, they had built their campsite on the branches of the big trees. However, when they woke up this morning, they found themselves surrounded by dense foliage. 4 to 5 people and their tents were wrapped up like dumplings by the dense foliage. And this was clearly the space that they and the others had cleared last night. What's going on? One of them was confused, scratching his head. I only slept for a while, why does it feel like so many years have passed? Ah look, the 2 trees next to us, I've just chopped off 2 big branches to make poles yesterday. Why are these 2 trees so much thicker now? Where I chopped off the branches, they've grown even thicker branches. The fellow grabbed the chest of the person next to him in a panic. Brother, how many years have we been here? My poor brother, I've just gotten married last month. I don't want to see your sister-in-law so wrinkled when I go back. The people around him were dumbstruck as well. Yes, the world had changed drastically in one night. What was going on? It was already dawn. Yun Yang exhaled softly, feeling his body that felt like it had been reborn, glowing with a surge of vitality. There was a smile at the corners of his lips. The lotus of endless fate, one leaf, nine heavens. When it first bloomed, the chaotic heaven and earth appeared. After the vicissitudes of time, fate knows not when. When the golden lotus blooms again, the jade plate clears the turbid sky. It was the creator of heaven, waiting for the fated one. Today the fate opens, descending before the path of Tao. Yun Yang squinted his eyes and said softly, the lotus of endless fate. It was not hard to understand. When it first bloomed, the chaotic heaven and earth appeared. In other words, the first time the lotus sprouted and bloomed, there was the primordial universe. The second time it sprouted and bloomed, it bore the jade plate of fate. It was because of the jade plate of fate that heaven was born. What Yun Yang had obtained this time was the third time the lotus of endless fate had sprouted. Therefore today the fate opens, descending before the path of Tao. What an amazing treasure! Yun Yang suppressed the churning excitement in his heart. When he delved deeper into his deific consciousness and saw the tiny green bud, he felt even closer to it. The endless divine art was only the first benefit that the lotus of endless fate had given him. It was a basic cultivation method. Only when certain conditions were met and the first lotus leaf was complete, when the second lotus leaf began to grow, perhaps he would obtain even more. However, how could he make the lotus of endless fate grow faster and faster? Yun Yang frowned. There was no hint at all for this. Yun Yang propped his chin on his hand, deep in thought. This lotus seed fell from the sky and knocked me unconscious. Since then it has been hanging on my chest. Up until that battle of life and death, there was nothing out of the ordinary. After the battle, I should have died 17 or 18 times, but I suddenly came back to life and the wound on my chest was gone as well. It was then that the lotus seed disappeared. The lotus seed must have fused with my bloodline and entered my body at that time. But I only went in, but nothing happened. My injuries didn't improve, and my cultivation didn't recover in the slightest. Until today. When I killed Wu Wenyuan, I felt a sudden surge of energy, and this energy seemed to come from Wu Wenyuan's corpse. It was only after I had this energy that the lotus seed suddenly appeared and let me know. Then, my dantian regained its vitality and began to produce energy, and I began to cultivate the endless divine art. A glimmer of understanding flashed in Yun Yang's eyes. He recalled the mantra of the endless divine art. The endless chaos, the great Tao gives birth to one. Something is born from nothing, endlessly multiplying. Absorb the air of injustice in this world. Comfort the souls of the living, endless grievances. The great Tao advances with a clear conscience. Although the heart of the lotus is bitter, it is the foundation of reproduction. Mind as a blade, all evil shall be repelled. Slay the evil and slaughter the spirits, the lotus seed sprouts. Illuminating the universe, the dust disperses and gives birth to light. Something is born from nothing, endlessly multiplying. Air of injustice, slay the evil and slaughter the spirits, the lotus seed sprouts. Yun Yang murmured, does it mean that I have to kill people to obtain the energy needed by the lotus of endless fate? And, slay the evil and slaughter the spirits, does it mean that I have to kill the wicked? As for absorbing the air of injustice in this world, comfort the souls of the living, endless grievances, that's easier to understand. Yun Yang was deep in thought. Brothers, if I'm not wrong, I should be able to avenge all of you very soon. If it's fortune, I shall enjoy it. If it's disaster, I shall resist it. As long as I have the power to avenge us, even if I have to become a demon, I Yun Yang have no regrets. Young master, today is the 9th of the 3rd month. The 9 Supremes memorial ceremony has begun. Lao Mei's voice came from outside. Today is the first anniversary of the hero's sacrifice. In another 2 hours, His Majesty the Emperor and the civil and military officials will arrive before the heroic soul monument. Yun Yang's thoughts were pulled back from the space of his consciousness. An indescribable pain flashed in his eyes. Young master, are you going? Yes. Yun Yang took a deep breath. Countless images flashed across his mind. He bit his lips. How can I not send my brothers on this journey? Chapter 7. Tiantang City. The capital city of the Empire of Yutong was one of the largest cities in the entire Tianshan continent. The population of the capital city and its surrounding areas was more than 8 million people. The city walls were tall and thick, easy to defend and difficult to attack. At this moment, the city that housed millions of people was filled with morning music. Countless people gradually appeared from all directions, forming long lines as they walked towards the center of Tiantang City. It was Tiantang Square. Tiantang Square was recognized by the entire Tianshan continent as the largest square in a city. It was built by the founding emperor of the Empire of Yutong himself. During normal times it was a huge training ground, but during special times when it was open to the public, it was Tiantang Square. Back then the founding emperor had said something. All the warriors who train in this square, now and in the future, will be guests of heaven, even if they die on the battlefield. Never to fall, the souls of the valiant soldiers remain forever. Thus Tiantang Square appeared. In the beginning it had been called Paradise Square, but as time went by, it had become Tiantang Square. The original name of Wuhan City had also gradually disappeared, becoming Tiantang City instead. Countless people swarmed into Tiantang Square from all directions like the tide. Everyone wore a respectful expression. Some wore white flowers, some had black muslin on their arms, some had a bouquet of fresh flowers. Incense, candles and other memorial items were everywhere. Today was not an ordinary memorial. It was a memorial to all the valiant souls who had died on the battlefield in the name of the entire nation. Especially the 9 Supremes. This mysterious name, this mysterious combination. 9 mysterious heroes. No one knew what their surnames were, no one knew what they looked like. However, everyone knew that these 9 people were the Empire of Yutong's top secret, the guardians of the entire Empire of Yutong. The 9 Supremes would always appear at the crucial moments of the countless wars between nations. As long as the 9 Supremes appeared, no matter how dangerous the war was, it could be averted. They were the guarantee of victory on the battlefield. Last year, on the 9th day of the 3rd month. This day would never be forgotten by the people of Yutong. It was on that day that they lost the 9 Supremes. When the 9 Supremes led 800 warriors on a secret mission, they were ambushed in front of Tianshan Cliff. Of the 809 people, not a single one survived. This was supposed to be a top-secret mission, but somehow the news had been leaked. The Empire of Yutong had been investigating it for a year. In the square, countless generals and veterans looked at the 9 monuments in the middle of Tiantang Square, standing tall and close to each other, with tears in their eyes. It was as if the 9 of them were still standing shoulder to shoulder. When they were alive, they had fought side by side, experienced joy, anger, sorrow and joy. Now that they had died, they were still together. In the crowd, a low choked voice sounded. The voice came from the northwest side of the square, where the remnants of the army were gathered. Countless veterans who had survived the battlefield, including those with disabilities, were all here, standing ramrod straight. Even the crippled soldiers who had lost their legs were still sitting ramrod straight. Facing their hero and benefactor, they respected him from the bottom of their hearts. It was as if the scene of the 9 Supremes charging into the battle formation had reappeared before their eyes. How awe-inspiring it had been. The Earth Dragon flipped, the earth churned, the enemy troops were thrown off their feet. That was Supreme Earth's display of power. Fire shot up into the sky, Supreme Flame's arrival. Giant waves surged, Supreme Water's arrival. The calm sky was suddenly filled with wind and clouds, thunder and lightning. Supreme Wind, Supreme Cloud and Supreme Thunder had arrived at the same time. The 9 Supremes. There was a sentence on each of the 9 Supremes' monuments. Everyone who came to the square stared at these few sentences for a long time, their hearts filled with grief. The earth was boundless, rolling like a dragon. Supreme Earth. With the sharp metal in hand, the heroes bowed their heads. Supreme Gold. Turbid waves surged, rampaging the world. Supreme Water. Towering trees, pillars flowing in the middle. Supreme Wood. Blazing flames rose, undefeatable. Supreme Flame. Thunder roared in the sky, intimidating the world. Supreme Thunder. Heroes' blood, mountain pass in dreams. Supreme Blood. Wind in the sky, heartless heaven. Supreme Wind. Heart of the 9 Supremes, clouds hanging in the sky. Supreme Cloud. The names of the 9 Supremes were carved on the stone tablets. Everyone seemed to see the 9 masked men again, still standing proudly between heaven and earth, facing the army and saying calmly, "Come." In front of each monument, there were countless people standing straight, lifting their heads and looking at them respectfully. Especially in front of the tablets of Supreme Cloud and Supreme Earth, there were the most people. Supreme Earth, the leader of the 9 Supremes, was the Supreme. Supreme Cloud, the tail of the 9 Supremes, was the brain of the 9 Supremes, the absolute core. The sun rose slowly. His Majesty's imperial carriage, surrounded by the civil and military officials, finally arrived. The ceremony had officially begun. Yunyang stood quietly in a corner. "Young master, do you need me to go with you?" "No need. You are now No need. Yes. Yun Yang rejected Lao Mei's request to come with him. He knew that when he stood here he would definitely lose his composure. However, he did not want anyone alive to know his identity as one of the 9 Supremes. Before avenging my brothers, how could I have the face to announce my identity to the world? Furthermore, the enemy was so strong. Once the slightest news leaked, it would be too late for regrets. Yin Yang dared not take the risk. He stood there quietly, his gaze deep as he looked at the 9 stone tablets in the square. His eyes were filled with an indescribable bitterness and longing. Brothers, I'm here. I'm here to see you. It was as if he was invisible. He stood quietly in the dark. The smell of incense and candles filled the air. His Majesty the Emperor's sorrowful voice was reciting the funeral oration. Below it there were suppressed cries. Yun Yang stood far away, his back ramrod straight, his gaze unfathomable. People walked past him continuously, but no one noticed that there was actually a living person in the dark. He was like a formless spirit. The art of cloud concealment of the 9 Supremes, Supreme Cloud. He stood quietly, not moving an inch. The wind howled, fluttering his deep purple robes. A sense of desolation filled the air quietly. Night fell slowly. The ceremony had long ended. Fresh flowers covered the ground. The smell of incense and candles filled the air. In front of the 9 Supremes' tablets, fresh blood was spilled. It was the blood of Wu Wenyuan's remaining followers. The people did not have the slightest bit of pity for these people. After the execution, countless angry people even rushed forward to smash the corpses into pieces. Throughout the entire process, old Marshal Qiu Jinhan's expression was dark. Just yesterday, Wu Wenyuan had suddenly disappeared from the celestial prison. In the middle of the night, his corpse had been sent back. Then Wu Wenyuan's wife and mother had also disappeared. The old marshal was enraged by the series of events that happened one after another. The Board of War was heavily guarded, the celestial prison was heavily guarded, and countless experts were hidden around. Yet, things had happened continuously without anyone knowing. This was the biggest joke in the world. The old marshal had already changed the personnel in charge of the celestial prison 3 times because of this incident. He had even broken dozens of wooden planks. Yet it was futile. The people in the square left in groups of 2s and 3s amidst the sorrowful sobs. The large square slowly emptied. Yun Yang still did not move, his gaze distant and deep. This life of war, I die on the battlefield. I only wish for my brothers to be happy and safe in their next lives. Their souls are not far, watch me. The night breeze whistled. The entire Tiantang Square had fallen into complete darkness. Yun Yang stood there with his eyes closed, vaguely feeling that he was still among the hundreds of thousands of comrades. Beside him there were still countless comrades. The feeling was so real. His own brothers were still talking and laughing loudly with him. The night wind blew his hair. In the darkness of the night, his well-defined face looked like a meticulously sculpted statue. He was steady yet lonely, and there was an indescribable sadness and depression about him. Low sobs could be heard. A young woman dressed in white walked over weakly, hugging her youngest daughter tightly. Her face was streaked with tears. Beside her, there was an old man supporting her with a pained expression. She stumbled as she walked, like a walking corpse in a daze. The excessive grief had drained her already weak body of almost all its strength. Wang Zhuang, we're home, the young woman murmured. Her eyes were dull and lifeless like dead ashes. The young woman passed by Yun Yang, not noticing his presence. Yun Yang's eyes were shut tight and he did not move, but the muscles at the corners of his eyes twitched violently. It was as if a deep sorrow had been torn apart. Deputy General Wang Zhuang's wife. Yun Yang still remembered Wang Zhuang. A year ago, Wang Zhuang had been married for 2 years and his daughter had just turned 1. But this time he never came back. Soldiers died for their country without regrets. But what about his wife and children? It had been a year and Wang Zhuang's family had lost their pillar of support. How were they now? The young woman's silhouette gradually faded away behind Yun Yang. Yun Yang sighed silently in his heart. Then Yun Yang frowned, feeling that something was amiss. He opened his eyes abruptly and saw 4 shadows following the young woman sneakily. They were a few burly men, staring at the frail young woman in front of them. Their eyes were filled with unconcealable lust. They carefully hid themselves under the cover of the night, trailing 100 feet behind the young woman unhurriedly. They were about to walk past Yun Yang. A burst of murderous intent flashed across Yun Yang's initially blank gaze. The 4 burly men did not know why, but they shuddered at the same time. It was as if an evil spirit had stared at them in the dark. This place is indeed a little sinister. One of the men murmured, feeling goosebumps all over his body. That's right, let's go back quickly. There are too many dead people here, it's uncomfortable. Another man shrunk his neck. Yun Yang's gaze grew colder as he looked at them. Too many dead people? This sentence alone is a capital offense. But Wang Zhuang is dead good. That dead man has been dead for a year, your father has endured it for a year. Now that the memorial ceremony is over, the limelight should be over. The leader of the group laughed in a low voice, full of schadenfreude. That's right, big brother. When this dead man was alive, he couldn't do anything and he made us unable to breathe. In the end, he still died a horrible death and became a lonely ghost. When Wang Zhuang was alive, we were bullied by him. Now it's time for the tables to turn. The leader of the men gulped. I have to say that bastard Wang Zhuang's wife is really pretty, especially now that she's crying. It's even more heartwarming. And that delicate and timid little body, ha ha ha. The other three men chuckled. The four of them walked past Yun Yang. Yun Yang sucked in a deep breath and glanced at the square in the night. It was as if he could see countless pairs of eyes watching him quietly. Those eyes seemed to be entrusting him with a task. He nodded forcefully, his thin lips pressed tightly together as he turned around quietly. His dark purple robes fluttered as he followed the ruffians quietly. No matter what world it was, there would always be some filth. Yun Yang's murderous intent was overwhelming. If that's the case, then let me kill them all. The further they walked, the more desolate and remote it became. As they walked slowly towards the edge of Tiantang City, their surroundings grew more and more eerie. The young woman subconsciously moved forward step by step, but she didn't think about where she was going, or where she should be going. If not for someone supporting her, she would have fainted on the ground. They were getting closer. There were lights flickering faintly in the distance. That was her home. But could a home without her husband still be considered a home? It's been a year, Wang Zhuang, have you been well underground? If it weren't for taking care of my daughter, I would have gone to find you long ago. Do you know how tiring it is for me to live like this alone? Just as she was about to turn into an alley, a strange cackle suddenly rang out behind her, like the hoot of an owl in the middle of the wilderness. Hey, young lady, don't walk so fast. A repulsive voice said in a strange tone, turn around and let this lord have a look. This body, it's so mesmerizing. The young woman turned a deaf ear to it and walked forward numbly. A figure flashed in front of him, and four burly men blocked his path with their arms crossed. Their faces were full of schadenfreude. I didn't see clearly in the dark. Isn't this General Wang Zhuang's wife, Wan Er? No wonder she's so seductive. Wan Er, what happened to you? Why are you wearing a white flower on your head? What happened? I heard that our awe-inspiring General Wang Zhuang is now a dead man? That's such a shame. The words were extremely nasty. The young woman and her husband stopped in their tracks. The elder who was supporting her trembled with anger. Wang Bao, what are you doing? Get out of the way. Wang Bao, the leader of the group, chuckled. Get out of the way? Why should I get out of the way? When Wang Zhuang was alive, I would give him face if he asked me to get out of the way. But now, he's been a ghost for a year and you want me to get out of the way. He guffawed and said in a strange voice, but, I have to say, Wan Er's getup, it's really unique. Her eyes are swollen from crying, it makes my heart ache to see her. Wan Er, Wang Zhuang doesn't love you, I'll love you. The elder stood in front of the young woman and said sternly, Wang Bao, Wan Er's husband, Wang Zhuang, died fighting for the empire of Yutong. He protected the country and risked his life for it. He's a national hero. You're only able to live and work happily because of the hero's protection. How dare you speak like this? Do you have any conscience? The burly man Wang Bao chuckled. Hero? Who asked him to go to war? I didn't ask him to go. He didn't die fighting for me either. What hero? It's all bullshit to me. Chapter 8. The ruffians had always longed for this famed beauty, but Wang Zhuang's reputation had spread far and wide. His fists were strong and he hated evil. When he was around, no one dared to look him in the eye. Finally, that bastard Wang Zhuang was dead. He had died on the battlefield. Well done. Besides, this memorial ceremony had proven that the previous period of fear was over. The spy had been caught and had been punished. Was this not the end of the matter? The ruffian's thoughts began to run wild again. The elder trembled with rage, his eyes wide with rage. Do you have any shame or conscience? Wang Zhuang fought for the country, his bones are not even cold yet, and you dare to bully his widow at such a time. Wang Bao, you will die a horrible death. Wang Bao sneered and stuck out his tongue to lick his upper lip. He sneered, you don't have to worry about me dying a horrible death. But Wang Zhuang, on the other hand, he really did die a horrible death. Old Jia, I'm warning you, if you don't move, your father will beat you up as well. He rushed forward and reached out to touch Wan Er's face, his voice evil. Wan Er, tell me, what do you get out of following a poor man like Wang Zhuang? Now, not only is he poor, but he's also dead. If you had followed me earlier, this wouldn't have happened. All these years, my feelings for you. Wan Er glared at Wang Bao and said through gritted teeth, Wang Bao, you will die a horrible death. Wang Bao cackled, your father couldn't afford to offend you in the past, but now, I will die a horrible death? Tonight, I will let you die a happy death. A strange cackle could be heard. Suddenly, from the shadows, a deep voice said, Wang Bao, tonight, I will let you die a happy death. As he spoke, Yun Yang's silhouette, clad in deep purple, appeared abruptly in the alley as if out of nowhere. He appeared in front of Wan Er, blocking Wang Bao's view. Two pairs of cold eyes looked at him. Yun Yang's rage was raging, almost exploding. The murderous intent in his heart could no longer be contained. Soldiers shed blood on the battlefield, dying in hundreds of battles. How could someone bully their family members in this place where they had risked their lives to protect? Such trash should be killed. Wang Bao and his three lackeys raised their heads and met Yun Yang's cold, emotionless gaze. A surging murderous aura suddenly surged out and surged through the air. At this moment, it was as if 10,000 ghosts had appeared at the same time. At this moment, the four hoodlums simultaneously felt as if they had suddenly fallen into a gloomy hell filled with the howling of evil spirits. Even his soul was frozen solid. One of the hoodlums cried out in surprise. He felt a burst of heat in his crotch, but under this gaze, he unconsciously peed himself and his whole body trembled. Yun Yang stood there, his gaze filled with murderous intent. The four hoodlums turned pale and staggered back at the same time. How could a few puny hoodlums resist such a ferocious aura that had been tempered in mountains of corpses and seas of blood? Fear flickered in Wang Bao's eyes as he tried to turn around and flee. However, under Yun Yang's cold gaze, his legs seemed to be wedged to the ground, unable to move. In the next moment, his fearful gaze landed on Yun Yang's face and he suddenly felt a sense of relief. Yun Yang's face was pale and his steps were unsteady. He looked like he was either severely injured or ill. Moreover, he was still young. Wang Bao could not help but feel relieved as he forced himself to ask, "What did you say?" There was a hint of disbelief in his voice when he asked. It was only then that his mind, which had been dizzy from fear, managed to regain some of its clarity. Yun Yang smiled coldly when he heard Wang Bao's question. Suddenly he raised his hand and slapped Wang Bao. Slap. With a loud bang, Wang Bao's body flew 3 feet into the air like a broken sack. His large and muscular body spun 3 times in the air before landing on the ground. With a loud cry, he spat out a mouthful of blood. Clang, 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 clang. A dozen teeth fell to the ground as the world spun around him. This seemingly ordinary slap had actually sent a man of nearly 200 caddies flying. What a vicious slap. Yun Yang strode forward and stomped on Wang Bao's face with a loud thud. With a clear crack, Wang Bao's nose was crushed. His face was a bloody mess. You didn't hear what I said, did you? Yun Yang's foot stomped hard on Wang Bao's face, listening to the crisp sound of his nose cracking under his foot. He said softly, "Do you want me to repeat myself?" No. Wang Bao groaned inhumanly. The piercing pain made him want to faint. He wanted to beg for mercy, but his mouth was being stepped on, making him unable to speak. His mouth was moaning, but no one knew what he was saying. He was even a little confused. What was going on? He was so arrogant and high-spirited just a moment ago. Where did this child come from? Why did he suddenly become like this? Yun Yang waved his hand and said to the remaining 3 ruffians, "Come here." The 3 ruffians were dumbfounded as they looked at the bloody mess in front of them. Although they ran amok in the village and had committed many evils, they had never seen such brutal methods. Hearing his words, their legs gave way and they almost knelt on the ground. One of them yelped and turned to run. Yun Yang snorted, "How dare you run?" With a wave of his hand, a silver fragment flew out and landed on the ruffian's thigh like a bolt of lightning. Under the watchful eyes of the crowd, the ruffian had only taken 2 steps when he was hit by the silver fragment. With a sudden scream and a crisp crack, he rolled on the ground. And that thigh of his was strangely bent. Above the knee and below the waist, the entire thigh bone was bent at a right angle. The other 2 ruffians screamed, their scalps tingling as they almost wet their pants. They were scared out of their wits. Had they met a legendary master? Agonizing cries could be heard as the ruffian with the broken leg rolled on the ground, hugging his thigh and screaming inhumanly. "What are you waiting for?" Yun Yang's foot was still on Wang Bao's face as he said to the remaining two ruffians, "What, do you want me to hit you too?" The two ruffians trembled as they stared at the two silver fragments in Yun Yang's hand, tossing them up and down. He couldn't help but kneel down with a thud. "Great, great hero. This little one. Please spare my life. Mercy?" Yun Yang said coldly, "If I let you go, how can I face my brothers who died in the war?" Wang Bao whimpered in pain as he begged for mercy. "Sir, have mercy. We are from the Green Snake Gang. Everything can be discussed." Green Snake Gang? There was even a gang? Yun Yang's eyes flashed coldly. "Stand up and follow me. Let me see what the Green Snake Gang is." He turned his head and nodded at Wan Er. "Go back first, this has nothing to do with you." Wan Er looked at him in shock, her face suddenly filled with excitement. Is it Wang Zhuang's brother?" Yun Yang was silent for a moment before he said, "Don't worry, no one will dare bully the families of soldiers in the future." He did not answer directly, instead turning around and dragging the four ruffians who were in so much pain to an abandoned yard, he closed the door behind him. "Green Snake Gang, who is the leader? How many people? Where is the headquarters?" Wang Bao and the others were in excruciating pain, but they did not dare to be careless and answered quickly. The person in front of them was a devil. They had no doubt that if they had answered any slower, they would have been killed on the spot by this fellow. After asking for all the information, Yun Yang wore a sinister smile on his face. "The Green Snake Gang? Forget about the small Green Snake Gang. Even the current crown prince who dares to bully the widow of a general like this will only end up dead in my hands." Killing them after leaving the place was to avoid trouble for Wan Er and the others, and also to obtain information about the Green Snake Gang. Since he had already gotten his hands on it, he had nothing to worry about. Yun Yang's murderous intent soared. A bright flash of saber light flashed. Blood splattered everywhere. Four heads fell to the ground. Yun Yang's voice was cold. "The world's filth cannot be eradicated, my saber is merciless." Chapter 9. The hero had bled on the battlefield. His family could no longer be bullied. Even the slightest bit of trouble must be avoided. Yun Yang would never back down on this point. He was cautious. Just like what he had said to Wan Er, no one would dare bully the families of the fallen warriors from now on. "I will kill as many as there are." Yun Yang raised his head and sucked in a long breath, murmuring, "Big brother, I finally understand what you meant. I understand why you asked me to come back and be an executioner outside the law. So, there's still so much filth and ugliness in this world after all, and the so-called law of the government can't wipe them all out? A hero can no longer shed tears when he bleeds." "You are right." Yun Yang murmured, "Big brother, don't worry. I will remember your words." Yun Yang was about to turn around when he suddenly jolted and stopped. He could clearly feel a few faint, mystical auras exuding from Wang Bao and the other three men and being absorbed by him, as expected. Yun Yang's deific consciousness sank into his subconscious and saw the tiny lotus sprout swaying gently. It seemed to have grown a little. Indeed, absorbing the air of injustice in the human world can make the lotus grow. My guess was right. Yun Yang pondered, does this mean that the more villains I kill, the faster the lotus of endless fate will grow? As for the endless divine art, the faster I improve? There's actually such a strange thing in this world, a cultivation method that suits my heart so well. Even without such a cultivation method, I would still kill such scum. What a waste. It was late at night. Yun Yang tidied himself up and disappeared into the night. That so-called Green Snake Gang actually has such a heartless scum like Wang Bao. I, your ninth lord, shall go and see what kind of trash this Green Snake Gang is. If they're all jackals of the same tribe, then I'll have to eliminate them completely. At the same time, I'll provide some nourishment for the lotus of endless fate. In the Green Snake Gang's headquarters, there were still 7 to 8 people sitting, discussing something. Under the dim yellow light, the faces of these people looked menacing. The so-called headquarters was just a courtyard that had long been abandoned and occupied by these hoodlums. Now that the war has come to an end, the country will definitely take good care of these soldiers and give them compensation. This is a huge windfall. The scar on Green Snake's face trembled. We naturally can't rob those who are strong and have martial arts. But, just like before, robbing those who are disabled on the battlefield. Don't tell me we can't rob a few disabled people? This money is practically a gift from the Imperium. The eyes of the gangsters lit up at the same time. He had done this many times. It was indeed simple and easy. Every one of these defeated soldiers has already returned home with a large sum of silver. Green Snake was almost drooling. As far as I know, this year's pension should be in our hands in the next few days. Once they receive this sum of silver, it will be time for us to move out. Big Brother is really far-sighted. Several gangsters revealed a covetous look at the same time. That's right, what's so hard about robbing a few handicapped people? Especially those with broken legs? They couldn't even catch up to them. This was a great idea. Li San, how many people are there on your side? Go check it out quickly. Do too, Sun Wu, both of you go check it out as well. When the operation begins, switch your borders. You do his and he does yours. This way it won't be easy to arouse suspicion. Green Snake commanded calmly. Yes, we brothers are going to be rich. The eyes of the gangsters shone brightly. Why isn't that bastard Wang Bao here yet? Green Snake said unhappily. He's still fooling around at such an important time. That bastard will die on a woman's belly sooner or later. Bang. A loud bang resounded. The door suddenly shattered completely at this moment. A man dressed in black suddenly appeared, walking in slowly like a ghost in the night. In this person's hand, a saber gleamed coldly. Green Snake and the rest were shocked and jumped up at the same time. Who are you? Bastard, how dare you come to find trouble with your grandfather? Are you tired of living? Yun Yang had only arrived for a short while, but after listening to Green Snake's last few words, he could no longer hold it in. Crippled in the war for the country, it was one thing for these bastards to not know respect and gratitude, but to think of robbing the disabled army. Such trash, it was intolerable. He rushed in directly. Catch him? Green Snake roared. Beside the door, two gangsters roared and pounced on Yun Yang. Yun Yang did not say a word, walking forward step by step, his gaze cold. The two gangsters were already in front of him. The corners of Yun Yang's lips curled up cruelly. The saber flashed. Two heads suddenly flew into the sky, two columns of blood spurting from the necks. Yun Yang kicked the headless bodies aside with each kick and continued to walk forward in silence. With every step he took, Green Snake felt that he was one step closer to the Grim Reaper. For a moment, his face was pale with fear. The 5 to 6 people beside him were also trembling, looking at the man in black in front of them in horror. Who was this person so cruel? He came in and killed without saying a word. Who are you? Who are you? Green Snake was scared out of his wits, retreating awkwardly. Hero, let's talk this out. I don't know how I've offended you. Yun Yang walked over without saying a word, his gaze cold. The murderous aura in the air was almost solidifying as he moved forward. The two gangsters by the door were scared out of their wits, turning to run away. The dazzling saber light suddenly flashed in the air, and the heads of the two running hoodlums flew into the air. Their bodies ran forward 3 steps before falling to the ground. Green Snake was so scared that he lost control of his bowels, shivering like a sieve. Hero? What is going on? Who are you? Why is this happening? Yun Yang was still silent, walking forward without a word. The short saber in his hand was dripping with blood. Plop, plop, plop. This was the sound of fresh blood dripping down the blade. It was like the King of Hell's summons, suffocating people. The remaining 3 gangsters in the room cried out in fear and suddenly knelt down. Hero, have mercy. Have mercy. Poor me, I have an 80-year-old mother and a 3-year-old child. Yun Yang's expression was cold and indifferent. The saber in his hand fell. The heads of the 3 people rolled out like overturned watermelons. Only Green Snake was left in the room. Yun Yang had started killing the moment he entered. Without a word, without any pause, he had already killed 7 people. According to Yun Yang's interrogation, there were only 12 people in the Green Snake gang. In addition to the 4 people who had died in his hands earlier, they were all dead now. The only one who was still alive was the leader of the Green Snake gang, Green Snake. Plop, plop. Yun Yang walked step by step towards the Green Snake. Green Snake collapsed on the ground, his body limp with fear. He could not imagine when and what he had done to offend such a murderous god. He had killed without saying a word from the beginning to the end. Looking at Yun Yang's shoes that were already in front of him, he knew that he had no chance of survival. At this moment, Green Snake suddenly became hysterical. Yun Yang's saber was already raised. Wait. Green Snake cried out in grief and indignation, this? Tiantang City is a place of law. Although we are not good people, according to the law, the crimes we have committed will not be punishable by death. You have drawn your saber and killed people. Are you not afraid of the law? Law. Yun Yang's eyes darted around, his face indifferent. The saber in his hand was raised. Green Snake's tears were flowing. Even if you want to kill me, you have to give me a reason. Why is that? Why? Yun Yang paused and said faintly, you have a subordinate called Wang Bao, right? Green Snake's eyes widened, almost popping out of their sockets. Yes, I do. Wang Bao bullied an orphan and a widow, so I came to see if others were the same. Green Snake's body froze, the grief and indignation in his eyes almost solidifying. He cried out in extreme injustice. This Wang Bao bullied an orphan and a widow, and you came to kill me? Suddenly he cried out hysterically, that has nothing to do with me, I'm innocent. Before he could finish, a cold glint flashed past and Green Snake's head fell to the ground, rolling twice. His eyes were facing the sky, his face filled with grief and indignation. Until his death he could not understand why Wang Bao bullied an orphan and a widow. What did it have to do with him? Why did he come to kill him? Yun Yang wiped his saber on the corpses and kept it away. Looking at the corpses on the ground, Yun Yang's eyes flashed with a cold glint. Law. This bunch of scum actually dared to talk about the law with me. Yun Yang murmured, with the country in danger, these hooligans have no conscience. According to the law they don't deserve death, but they should be killed for bullying disabled soldiers. They must be killed. You're right, there is law in this city. According to the law you indeed don't deserve death. The law won't kill you but I will. Yun Yang turned around indifferently and was about to leave. However, he suddenly felt that there were several mystical powers in the world that had burrowed into his body. Yun Yang's subconscious was shaken. He was shocked to find that the tiny sprout of the lotus of endless fate was growing rapidly as it swayed. Chapter 10. Yun Yang felt a tingling sensation all over his body, an indescribable comfort. In his sea of consciousness, a piece of dark green lotus leaf was swaying and growing. Slowly it became the size of a fan. Meanwhile, the sharp bud of another piece of lotus leaf had already emerged. Countless mystical information surged into Yun Yang's mind. At this moment he even felt that his head was a little swollen and numb. Yun Yang picked up his movement skill and flew towards the residence of Yun while his mind was still clear. Along the way, due to the growth of the lotus of endless fate, endless pure air of vitality was exuding and flourishing. Thus, the whole of Tiantang City was thrown into chaos. Although humans were the soul of all beings, they were not very sensitive to the changes in the spiritual qi of the universe. The most sensitive to spiritual qi and vitality was none other than the mystical beasts of the Tianshan continent. The higher the level of the mystical beast, the more sensitive it was to the changes in pure air of vitality and spiritual qi. As one of the top 3 cities in the continent, Tiantang City was definitely filled with hidden talents. Mystical qi experts, martial world heroes, reclusive masters, aristocratic families. The number was uncountable. Among these people, there were too many who reared one or a few mystical beasts. Of course, they were not treated as pets but as partners in battle. The strength of mystical beasts' combat power was well known. A 9th level mystical beast's combat power was not below that of a grandmaster. Of course, a 9th level mystical beast was a mythical species that could only be encountered by chance, but 3rd, 4th, 5th, and 6th level mystical beasts were plentiful in Tiantang City. There were even quite a number of 7th level mystical beasts. At this moment, all the mystical beasts in Tiantang City were restless. The higher the level, the more agitated they were. For a moment, the whole of Tiantang City was in chaos. In the first room of the Lingyun Inn in Tiantang City, a young girl dressed in green rested her chin on her hands, playing with the pet in front of her with a wide smile. She would only be so relaxed in front of her pet. It was a little fellow about 3 feet long, with 2 jade-like horns on its head, 2 red eyes and 3 tails behind it. The fur on its body was as smooth as silk, and it was currently lying on the bed lazily, with an extremely satisfied expression on its face. If someone had seen it, they would have cried out in surprise, "Thousand illusion monkey?" Profound beasts were hard to come by, but a cub was even rarer. Ordinary Shen beast hunters could kill Shen beasts, but Shen beasts would kill their children with their own hands before they died. They would rather kill their children with their own hands than allow their children to be enslaved by humans. The higher the grade of the profound beast, the more it was like this. The Thousand Illusion Monkey was one of the best among them. A baby Thousand Illusion Monkey could not even be described with the words priceless. The Thousand Illusion Monkey was an 8th grade profound beast. Among all the known profound beasts in the profound sky continent, it was already at the top of the food chain. Moreover, the 1,000 illusion monkey could advance. Although the chances were slim, it was still there. Now one had actually appeared in Tiantang City. If others were to find out, it would definitely cause a huge uproar. It was at this moment that the 1,000 illusion monkey suddenly straightened its body. Its ears perked up, and its blood-red eyes shone with a brilliant light. It was an expression of extreme excitement. Even the horns on its head were shining brightly. Ling Ling, what's wrong? The woman was shocked and immediately cried out, Ling Ling, what are you doing? Where are you going? Someone come. Someone come. Someone come. The 1,000 illusion monkey suddenly stood up, and with a wave of its 3 tails, it leaped out of the window like an arrow. It was an 8-story building, but the 1,000 illusion monkey moved as if it was walking on flat ground. With a leap, it disappeared into the night. The woman panicked and cried out involuntarily. She then remembered that she had left home on her own and had not brought anyone with her. In a state of panic, he jumped out of the window without hesitation. Yun Yang felt a comfortable itch all over his body. His head was swollen, as if there was an endless stream of information rushing into his brain. He did not have the leisure to check it out. He could only hurry home. Just as he was about to reach the residence of Yun after another intersection, he suddenly heard a strange squeaking sound, as if something was squeaking. In the next moment, a white streak of light shot towards him like a bolt of lightning in the dark sky. The speed was extremely fast. Yun Yang only had a thought in his mind when the white streak was already in front of him. Yun Yang looked and saw a small golden-furred monkey squatting obediently in front of his feet, lifting its head to look at him with eager eyes. Yun Yang was speechless. A monkey had suddenly jumped in front of him in the middle of the dark night. What was it doing? It even put on such a familiar posture, such a friendly gaze. This is the first time we've met, all right? Yun Yang almost wanted to turn his head to look. Was this Tiantang City or the mystical beast forest? Seeing that Yun Yang was ignoring it, the little monkey actually squeaked with eagerness and eagerness. It scratched its head and hugged Yun Yang's legs. It lifted its tiny head, asking for Yun Yang to hug it. However, the scratching of its head startled Yun Yang. 2 small white jade horns that were hidden under the golden fur were revealed. Dragon horns on its head and many tails on its back. White jade as its bones and a sea of blood as its pupils. A mystical being of this world, the 1,000 illusion monkey. The one in front of him was the infant of the 1,000 illusion monkey. This is strange. Yin Yang scratched his head as well. A 1,000 illusion monkey actually came to me on its own when I was out for a stroll. Am I going to be so lucky today? Looking at the pitiful little monkey scratching its ears and cheeks, Yun Yang's heart softened and he reached out to hug the 1,000 illusion monkey. The little monkey looked contented as it nestled comfortably in Yun Yang's embrace. Its furry arms were spread wide and snuggled into Yun Yang's embrace. It let out a satisfied whimper as it closed its eyes and was about to fall asleep. Even its 3 tails were stuffed into Yun Yang's embrace, its entire body curled into a furry ball. Yun Yang was stunned. The 1,000 illusion monkey was an 8th-level mystical beast. Although it was only a 3-tailed cub, its intelligence was definitely not low. The legendary 1,000 illusion monkey was said to be ferocious, powerful, and ever-changing. How could it be so easy to approach? It didn't do anything, but it jumped into my embrace when it saw me. Moreover, it looked like it was living and working in peace and contentment. This little monkey isn't retarded, is it? Yun Yang stared at the little monkey in his embrace, dumbfounded. At this moment, a chilling aura enveloped him. It was a sharp, murderous aura. Yun Yang could feel a sharp sword pointed at him. If he made any sudden movements, he would bring disaster upon himself. He had not even recovered 1/10 of his strength. Facing such a murderous aura and such a sword, he had no chance of fighting back. However, the power of the endless divine art in his meridians began to circulate. It was as if he was an emperor who had been provoked. Although he was weak, his position as the ruler of the world was not to be sullied. "Where did you come from, thief?" A cold, delicate voice called out, "Put down my monkey." Yun Yang was exasperated. "Thief?" Yun Yang lifted his head to look and saw a slender silhouette appear out of nowhere amidst the night fog in front of him. It was as if a thick cloud of fog had suddenly condensed into a beautiful woman. Then she took a step out of the thick fog. There was no sword in her hand, but the sharp sword aura did not weaken at all. A faint fragrance, like that of orchids, slowly permeated the night fog. The woman had a graceful figure. She stood in the clouds, but she gave off the feeling that she was a fairy in the clouds, holy and pure. However, Yun Yang did not feel anything about it. To him, spiritual beasts and beautiful women did not matter to him at all. He lifted his head slightly and asked, "Is this thousand illusion monkey yours?" The woman's face was hidden in the thick fog, her voice cold. "Is it yours?" Yunyang said faintly, "It's not mine. However, I politely declined the words thief. Please take it back." Although he felt that this woman was unfathomable and had a high cultivation base, he would not back down. Nothing had happened. "Your monkey came to find me and I couldn't even chase it away. How dare you call me a thief?" The woman took a step forward. She was initially filled with rage and anxiety, but then her pretty eyes widened and her mouth opened in surprise. Looking at the little monkey that was snuggling comfortably in Yunyang's embrace, she could hardly believe her own eyes. If it were not for the thick fog that covered her face, Yunyang would have seen the shock she was feeling right now. But even so, her delicate body still staggered a little. What did I just see? The thousand illusion monkey. I've served it for 3 months and it's not even close to me. This fellow in front of me is obviously meeting the little monkey for the first time, but it's lying in its arms so obediently. It was obvious that this person was not forcing it. Everything was voluntary for the thousand illusion monkey. Seeing her approach, the little fellow actually shrunk back into the young man's arms, burying its head into his clothes. Instead, it left its owner with a red butt. The woman relaxed and said apologetically, "I'm sorry, this little fellow suddenly ran out on its own. I was a little anxious. I was rude just now, please forgive me, young master." Yunyang was a little surprised. This woman's cultivation base was unfathomable, and she was a young woman. Young people were full of vigor. Under his cold words, he was actually able to immediately control his temper and apologize to him. However, this was a rare thing. Which woman like this was not spoiled rotten? Each of them had their eyes on the top of their heads and were proud and arrogant. The woman's words made Yunyang feel a little embarrassed. He said, "Since it's your spiritual item, please take it back." The thousand illusion monkey was a spiritual creature of heaven and earth, but Yunyang did not care about it at all. Even if it was an adult thousand illusion monkey, Yunyang would not be envious, let alone a cub. Looking at this little fellow, it would take at least 70 to 80 years for it to grow into a 7-tailed thousand illusion monkey. 70 to 80 years. I'm getting old. An old man with a monkey by his side? Hey, your owner is here. Yunyang grabbed the thousand illusion monkey's golden hair. Go back quickly. In the thick fog, the woman's almond-shaped eyes widened. He dared to grab the thousand illusion monkey's hair? This was the taboo of the thousand illusion monkey. Even the master of the thousand illusion monkey, the close companion of the thousand illusion monkey, would not dare to do this. It would make the thousand illusion monkey go berserk. What happened next shocked the woman even more, to the point that her mind was in a mess. Chapter 11. The little monkey was still acting shamelessly and curled up into a ball. The man had actually grabbed the tuft of hair on the top of its head and lifted it up. Its 2 front paws were tightly gripping the clothes of the man in front of it as it squeaked anxiously. Its eyes were pleading, tears of grievance rolling down its cheeks, but it was unwilling to leave this rude fellow's embrace no matter what. It was not angry at all, not resisting at all. Instead, it was pleading. As the owner of the thousand illusion monkey, the lady naturally understood the monkey's intentions. "I beg you, don't let me go, I'm willing to stay in your embrace," Yunyang said impatiently. "You're not mine, why are you clinging to me?" He stretched out his hand and slapped the thousand illusion monkeys, but then picked it up and tossed it away like it was a ball made of silk. The lady in green caught it instinctively. The green-robed woman subconsciously caught it. She saw that the little monkey was struggling with all its might, desperately trying to run out. It was shouting anxiously. It looked as if it was very eager to return to that person's arms again. The lady in green's mouth twitched as she hugged the monkey tightly. "Thank you, young master. May I ask for young master's name?" If this fellow before her was not a mythical beast tamer, then he must have some kind of treasure on him to have elicited such a reaction from the thousand illusion monkey. As she spoke, the lady's strong deific sense had already scanned Yunyang 70 to 80 times. He was confused and depressed at the same time. There was nothing. This insignificant cultivation base was only slightly stronger than an ordinary person. He could not be considered an expert. He was definitely not a beast tamer. Then why was the thousand illusion monkey acting this way? She had been feeding it for so long, but it had never been so affectionate towards her. "I dare not, I am Yunyang." Yunyang nodded. "Since the item has been returned to its rightful owner, I shall take my leave. Before I leave, I have to give you a piece of advice." "Advice?" The lady in green asked in surprise. That's right. Young lady, you should change your pet. Yun-yang nodded and looked at the little monkey that was looking at him longingly. The lady's eyes flickered with curiosity as she said, "It's not very elegant to ride a monkey on a young lady's shoulder. As for monkeys, old men are the best." He nodded and smiled politely. Then he turned around and left without hesitation. His tall figure quickly disappeared into the night. Facing a fairy-like beauty, facing a legendary spirit beast, he actually avoided it as if it was a snake or scorpion, abandoning it like a pair of worn-out shoes. According to common sense, if a beautiful female protagonist asks for your name, then you should at least ask for her name, right? However, Yun-yang had no such concept at all. He looked as if he was afraid that the beauty would pester him if he walked any slower, and he even wanted to annoy her before he left. Change pets? The green-robed woman was dumbfounded. This was an 8th grade Shen beast. Another one? Looking at Yun-yang's receding silhouette, his eyes flashed as he said softly, Yun-yang is 19 years old this year, the only son of the Empire of Yutang's Heavenly Marquis. 5 years ago he was brought to Tiantang City by Heavenly Marquis and his past is unknown. In these 5 years, there are only a dozen or so incidents regarding this young Master Yun. It seems that he doesn't go out most of the time. Or is he not at home? However, although Yutang's Heavenly Marquis has always been mysterious, his true identity should be the martial world's superb swordsman, the 7 Steps killer sword Yun Xiaoyao. However, when did Yun Xiaoyao have such a big son? It shouldn't be hidden from the world. The green-robed woman frowned slightly, puzzled. He was supposed to be an ordinary heir of Heavenly Marquis, but he seemed to be shrouded in a layer of mystery. No matter how one looked at it, it made sense, but no matter how one looked at it, it was still shrouded in mystery. What a strange character. The lady in green shook her head and chuckled. A young lady bringing a supreme-class mystical beast cub to Tiantang City alone. If it were anyone else they would have coveted it, but this fellow actually didn't notice it at all. What an oddity indeed. Besides, the 1,000 illusion monkey, this little thing that doesn't speak to anyone in this world, is actually so inexplicably affectionate towards this young Master Yun. The 1,000 illusion monkey in her arms looked at the direction where Yun-yang had left, crying pitifully. Good man, why did you leave me behind? Why didn't you take me with you? I want to follow you so badly, I don't want to follow my master. He purposely angered me before he left. Obviously he saw how close the 1,000 illusion monkey was to him and was afraid of trouble. He purposely angered me so that I didn't bring the monkey to him? It looks like this young Master Yun. The green-robed woman's eyes glinted. It's time to get to know him properly. Her voice was ethereal. Then, with a twirl of her graceful figure, her entire being became illusory in the thick fog. When the night fog dispersed with the wind, the woman's silhouette had already disappeared without a trace. By the time Yun-yang returned to the residence of Yun, Lao Mei was already drenched in sweat. His young master had not recovered from his severe injuries and did not have an ounce of strength left in him. He had gone to the sacrificial ceremony alone and the ceremony had long ended, but his young master had not returned yet. It was already late at night. Young master, where have you been? Why are you back so late? It's a troubled time now, it's not safe out there. Once Yun-yang entered the room, Lao Mei started grumbling incessantly. Yun-yang comforted him and finally stopped Lao Mei's grumbling. Then, like he was being chased by a ferocious beast, he hurriedly entered his room and shut the door with a bang. The first leaf of the lotus of endless fate had already grown. Yun-yang could not wait to know what he would get. Ever since he had killed those from the Green Snake Gang, the changes in his body were like a tidal wave. Yun-yang could not calm himself down at all. Just as he was about to return home, he had run into the 1,000 illusion monkey and the woman. Finally getting rid of them, Yun-yang could not wait any longer. Returning to his room, he sat down with his legs crossed impatiently and sent his deific consciousness into his subconscious. His subconscious was shrouded in a thick, purple fog. A large, emerald-green lotus leaf was floating in his subconscious, emitting a green glow that filled the entire subconscious. This green, brimming with life, made one feel refreshed at first glance. The green aura entered his subconscious and flooded his meridians. At that moment Yun-yang felt as light as a feather. When Yun-yang's deific consciousness entered, the lotus leaf that had already taken form suddenly quivered twice and detached itself from the lotus of endless fate. It floated towards Yun-yang. Yun-yang subconsciously stretched out his hand and the lotus leaf landed lightly in his palm. In the place where the lotus of endless fate's leaves used to be, the shadow of a small lotus leaf suddenly appeared. It was only half the size of a palm, but every vein on it was clearly visible. Yun Yang's subconscious was shaken as his deific consciousness retreated from his subconscious. Sitting on his bed, Yun Yang opened his eyes in a daze. He felt a cooling sensation in his hand and it was extremely comfortable. He looked down subconsciously. Yun Yang cried out in surprise. In his hand was a piece of emerald green lotus leaf. The lotus leaf was as big as the table in front of him, emitting a gentle glow with a hint of purplish gold. A purplish gold glow? Yun Yang's heart skipped a beat as he looked at it. There were rows of tiny words written on it. The moment Yun Yang saw it, the tiny words suddenly spun and left the lotus leaf, rising into the air and turning into a ray of golden light that shot into the space between Yun Yang's brows. Creation from nothing, endless growth. Slaying the 10 evils, the lineage of the lotus grows. Obeying the will of heaven, obeying the will of man. Yun Yang understood at once when he saw this. It turned out that the first leaf of the lotus of endless fate required the killing of 10 evildoers to obtain the heir of karma and injustice to grow. He had first killed Wu Wenyuan, then Wang Bao and the other 3 thugs, and then the 8 members of the Green Snake Gang. He had already killed 13 people. It was no wonder that not only had the first lotus leaf grown, even the second lotus leaf had a sharp tip. The lotus leaf of divine will, obeying the will of the heart. The will of heaven is like a blade, the blade is endless. Yun Yang frowned as he looked at the lotus leaf in his hand. This lotus leaf of divine will was the first treasure that the lotus of endless fate had given to him. Obviously, to understand it literally, it would become whatever he wanted it to become. Since the will of heaven is like a blade, then you shall become a blade, Yun Yang said as he looked at the lotus leaf that was emitting a soft green glow in his hand. Even now, he still couldn't believe that a lotus leaf could transform into a steel saber. However, before he could finish his words, he felt a weight in his hand. Looking down, the lotus leaf had disappeared. What appeared in his hand was a saber that gleamed with a chilling light. A saber that Yun Yang liked from the bottom of his heart the moment he saw it. It was purplish blue in color, and at the end of the hilt was a budding lotus flower. When he held it, it was like the stem of the lotus, with tiny protrusions on it. When Yun Yang held these tiny protrusions in his hand, not only did they not give him a bumpy feeling, they felt even tighter. It was as if there was an endless space within. When Yun Yang held it, he actually felt a faint breeze of coolness. He had a feeling that no matter how much he sweated or how slippery he smeared on it, as long as he held it, there would never be any slippery phenomenon. There was only a slight protrusion at the end of the handguard, oval in shape and slightly concave, forming a subtle curve. It could prevent the enemy's blood from flowing backward, and it could also perfectly offset the resistance of the force. The blade was cold and as thin as a cicada's wing. The back of the saber was slightly thicker, and the blade was 2 feet and 7 inches long. Strangely, the front half seemed to be illusory, almost invisible, but from the back half, one could actually see the tip of the blade. A saber with 2 tips? The tip was especially sharp, 2 fingers longer than an ordinary saber, but the blade itself was thinner and narrower than an ordinary saber. There were specks of starlight on the blade, as if all the stars in the universe had gathered on it. There should have been countless dents on the blade, but upon closer inspection, there was nothing at all. It was smooth and glossy. The entire saber's shape was smooth and exceptionally perfect. Even the slightest curve was filled with beauty. It was not the style of an ordinary saber, but it was definitely not strange. Anyone who saw this saber would only be amazed. This was a work of art, not a lethal weapon. It was beautiful. Even with Yun Yang's extremely picky and knowledgeable eyes, he could not find a single flaw in it. Heaven's blade. These 4 words jumped out of Yun Yang's mind. Apart from the natural formation of the heavenly axiom, it was impossible for any master to forge such a perfect saber. The heaven's blade lived up to its name. Heaven's will is like a saber, the saber of heaven's will, slaughtering souls under the saber, enforcing justice on behalf of heaven. Yun Yang held the saber in his hand and slowly entered a state of oblivion. In his mind, there was a silhouette slowly executing the saber technique. Destiny blade truth, destiny's first saber. Concentrating, holding the saber's hilt, coldly looking at the world's unjust. You have done as you please, you have abhorred yourself. Heaven's will blade is merciless. 1 saber, 2 styles. The first style, merciless blade. The second style, merciless Tao. Yun Yang felt that he had entered a mystical world of martial arts. The destiny blade truth had surpassed his understanding of all the styles in this world. This was only the first saber. However, Yun Yang felt that as long as his cultivation base was sufficient, no one in this world could escape from his saber. It was a pity that his current cultivation base had only recovered a tenth of his original cultivation base. Everything had to start from scratch. Time passed slowly. Yun Yang was already familiar with the changes of the first saber. Although it was only a saber technique, it was a combination of body movement, footwork, and mental cultivation to be able to execute this saber perfectly. Yun Yang held the lotus leaf saber in his hand and practiced again and again in his room until he was drenched in sweat and almost exhausted. However, he still felt that it was difficult to unleash the power of this style. Looks like I can only slowly practice and comprehend it from now on. Yun Yang sheathed his saber and thought, with my current cultivation base I can only unleash half of the first style's power at most, but I have to use up all the spiritual energy in my body. The power of the first saber of destiny is indeed earth-shattering. He looked at the purplish-blue saber in his hand that was as dazzling as the stars in the night sky and smiled warmly. Slowly he slit his wrist and fresh blood flowed out. He wiped his blood on the saber with his finger and said softly, "Divine blade, from now on, you are my companion for life. Let me bring you to slaughter all the injustices in this world." In his eyes he seemed to see the battlefield filled with blood and fire. He saw countless warriors shouting and fighting, the smoke of war everywhere, the flames of war spreading everywhere. The faces of his 8 brothers flashed before his eyes one by one. Finally it was Tianshan Cliff, the battle that was etched into his soul. Then it was the scene of the families of the heroes, the orphans and widows of the martyrs being bullied. The murderous aura around him rose abruptly. The divine blade trembled and actually let out a clear saber hum. Its entire body shone with a dazzling light that lingered for a long time. It was as if the stars in the sky had suddenly descended upon the mortal realm. Rainbows lingered. After a long time, the saber suddenly shook like there was a whirlpool on its blade, sucking in the dazzling starlight and beautiful rainbows. Chapter 12. Yun Yang did not have a peaceful night, but somewhere else, there was someone who was even more troubled. The residence of Marshal. Old Marshal Qiu Jinhan's thick brows were knitted together tightly. Who was it that took Wu Wenyuan away, killed him and sent his corpse back? Who was it that saved Wu Wenyuan's mother and wife? These 2 questions baffled the old marshal. Since they had killed Wu Wenyuan, why did they save his wife and mother? If they could save Wu Wenyuan's wife and mother, why did they not save Wu Wenyuan's children as well? It was a complete mess. Moreover, they had been brought out, sent in, and taken out from the tightly guarded prison. This incident instilled an inexplicable sense of fear in old Marshal Qiu. This was the prison. It was one of the most heavily guarded places in the capital city. How could they allow people to go in and out like they were walking on flat ground? Beside him was a middle-aged man dressed in a scholar's robe. He looked elegant and had a carefree demeanor, as if everything was a breeze to him. "Marshal, I think this matter is no longer important. After all, those who should be killed have been killed." The middle-aged man smiled faintly. "To me this matter is not as important as the others." Qiu Jinhan frowned. Killing Wu Wenyuan, sending his corpse back and saving his wife and mother. The middle-aged man said, "The person who did this is obviously the same person, or rather, the same organization. This organization is not on Wu Wenyuan's side, that's for sure. If they were accomplices they would never have killed Wu Wenyuan." Qiu Jinhan asked, I'm guessing that killing Wu Wenyuan and saving his wife and mother is only a form of exchange." The middle-aged man smiled. "This explains it. Not saving Wu Wenyuan's children means that he's Wu Wenyuan's enemy. He doesn't want Wu Wenyuan's bloodline to continue." The middle-aged man said, "That's why he did such an inexplicable thing. Overall, this young brother thinks that this person is on our side. He's a friend and not an enemy. Even though he's a little unreasonable and lawless. It's understandable." Qiu Jianhan nodded slowly. "So what are the other matters?" "As for the other matters," the middle-aged Confucian scholar said, "Wu Wenyuan's evidence is conclusive, and he deserves to be punished. But there must be a huge force behind Wu Wenyuan. As for Wu Wenyuan until his death, a certain aspect of his identity has not been exposed. And after today's memorial service, I wonder if the marshal has seen the records of the guards at the city gates?" There was a hint of worry on the middle-aged scholar's face. "Many martial artists are entering Tiantang City from all directions. There are people from all 4 sections. Among these people, many of them are experts, but they are not recorded in any records. It's clear that these people's identities are all fake. Just as Wu Wenyuan was killed, there are suddenly so many people hiding their identities and disguising themselves to enter Tiantang City. This is terrifying to think about. I'm afraid the revenge of that mysterious organization has come. In other words, he has a certain objective. The middle-aged scholar said, regarding this, Marshall must guard against it. Qiu Jianhan nodded solemnly. I still feel. Qiu Jianhan said, the incident at the Celestial Prison is a little strange. I feel. After a moment of hesitation, the middle-aged scholar said, this incident is somewhat similar to when the Nine Heavens dictum was issued back then. He frowned in uncertainty and said in a low voice, that familiar undercurrent that no one can resist, that feeling, what? Old Marshal Qiu Jianhan stood up abruptly, a terrifying glint in his eyes. 9 Supremes? Early morning. Tiantang City was rather chaotic. With the sudden outbreak of 12 deaths, Tiantang City's public security office was overwhelmed with work. The bailiffs investigated everywhere, but the results of the investigation were that everyone looked at each other, feeling that it was not a big deal. Those who had died were gangsters who had committed heinous crimes. From the expressions and tone of those who were investigated, they were all satisfied. They were finally dead. These bastards finally had someone to take care of. Such a performance. There were even some who were excited, buying food and drinks to call their friends. Come, let's drink. There's something joyous today. What a joyous occasion. There were even some who complained, why weren't the bastards on our side taken care of? After investigating, the bailiff did not obtain any valuable information. He only received a series of excited feedback. The governor's lips twitched as he reported to the prefectural magistrate. He said nonchalantly, there are no clues, let's take our time. All right, take our time. We'll take our time then. The bailiffs retreated, feeling relieved. It's good that these F***ers are dead. Who the hell would investigate? The saber wind howled in the yard as Yun Yang familiarized himself with his saber. Of course, he was reluctant to use the divine edge when it came to familiarizing himself with the saber. The blade of heavens had already turned into a purple lotus on his sleeve. Such a magical weapon was only worth its price if it was used when it was easiest to trick someone. What was the point of revealing it in advance? As for hanging it on his waist every day, wouldn't that be foolish? The first style merciless blade. The tip of Yun Yang's toes spun as he supported himself with his knees. The rotation of his calf drove the rotation of his waist, turning his body in half a circle. The wooden saber in his hand moved diagonally upwards, tearing the space apart with a swoosh. He had practiced this style over and over again hundreds and thousands of times. Lao Mei watched from the side, his lips twitching. This style looked pretty good, but it was a pity that it would be useless in a real battle. However, the young master was really working hard in his cultivation. The last bit of his energy was completely expended. Yun Yang finally sat on the ground. Sweat poured out like a waterfall, drenching the lower part of his body. He shut his mouth and tried to breathe through his nostrils, using the Endless Heart Sutra to guide the mystical qi in his dantian to flow through his meridians. Although he was almost suffocating, he would never open his mouth to pant at this moment. If he did so, the result of his morning of hard work would be less than a tenth of it. After half a cup of tea's time, Yun Yang's breathing stabilized and his pale face slowly regained its color. Lao Mei's expression changed from disdain to respect. Not everyone could be so harsh on themselves. Ever since his young master had started his saber practice until his breathing had calmed down, he had broken through the human body's limit more than a dozen times. These breakthroughs would become Yun Yang's eternal improvement. There would never be a regression. This was because he had chosen the most difficult cultivation when he was the most exhausted. With such wisdom, young master will definitely achieve great things in the future. It's just that. Lao Mei had a long-standing doubt in his heart. Young master has always planned before taking action, never acting impulsively. He seeks advantages and avoids disadvantages, extremely intelligent. What was it that caused young master to be so severely injured last year? Why did he lose all of his cultivation base? What did young master go through? Lao Mei felt that although he had followed his young master for 3 years, he had never truly understood him. It was as if there was a thick layer of mystery shrouding him at all times. It was impossible to see him clearly. What was strange was that the jades on his young master seemed to be gone. His young master had always liked the frost jade as it could calm his mind, but now not even a single piece was missing. Where did they go? The door knocker was knocked. May I ask if young master Yun is at home? A crisp voice rang out. Yun Yang and Lao Mei were stunned at the same time. There was actually a visitor? This was a rare occurrence. Everyone in Tiantang City knew that the residence of Yun had closed its doors and never accepted visitors. It had been 4 to 5 years since there had been any visitors. Today, for the first time ever, someone had come. Chirp chirp. An excited voice could be heard. A golden-furred monkey dashed in, hopping from the gate to Yun Yang's yard with ease. It dashed into Yun Yang's embrace with a swoosh, waving its limbs excitedly. Yun Yang's expression was one of utter bewilderment. He had just met it last night, why was it here again today? Am I that popular with monkeys? I had purposely angered that woman last night, why did it still come? Looking at the little monkey that was less than 2 feet in his embrace, its red buttocks sticking out as it crawled around in his embrace. With a swoosh, it climbed onto his shoulder and slid down his back. In the next moment, it actually climbed back up from his crotch and burrowed into his embrace. Yun Yang's eyes rolled back and forth. A fragrant breeze wafted in from the main door, refreshing and refreshing. A slender lady was standing at the main door, smiling at Yun Yang. The lady had a slender figure, slim and well-proportioned. She was dressed in an ordinary green robe, but it was as if she would fly with the wind when she wore it. She exuded an aura of spirituality, completely unlike someone from the secular world. However, her face was a little too ordinary. Of course, Yun Yang would not think that this was the lady's true face. How could a lady with such a delicate aura have such an ordinary face? Young Master Yun, I hope you won't be offended by my sudden visit. The lady's voice was crisp, giving off an indescribable sense of comfort. I dare not, I dare not. Your presence brings light to my humble abode. Yun Yang smiled gently. Please come in. Thank you, young master. The lady smiled and walked in. Seeing the 1,000 illusion monkey that had been clinging to Yun Yang since it saw him, a glimmer of light flashed across its eyes. I was impolite last night. I actually forgot to ask for your name, young lady, Yun Yang said apologetically. The lady in green resisted the urge to roll her eyes and thought to herself, if I hadn't come today, I'm afraid you wouldn't have thought of this for the rest of your life. He must have seen me coming and had nothing to say, so he used this as an opening remark. This was a man who looked smart, but in reality he didn't understand anything and couldn't care less about his daughter's feelings. Young master must be joking. My surname is Ji and it means stratagem, the lady in green said. What a good surname. Yun Yang clapped his hands and praised loudly with an exaggerated expression and tone, just this word alone makes me think. Since the beginning of time, all those who have achieved great things have used stratagems. Stratagems are the foundation of everything in this world. The so-called hegemony, the so-called loyalty in history, they are all just stratagems. Young master is too kind. The lady in green could not help but roll her eyes. If it wasn't for the 1,000 illusion monkey and herself, she would have stood up and left immediately. It's just a surname and you're praising it so much. More importantly, you're afraid that others can't see the hypocrisy when you're praising others. This fellow was simply asking for a beating. Yun Yang rubbed his nose and said, May I ask for your name? Miss Ji answered snappily, a single word, Ling, good name. Yun Yang praised loudly, all stratagems must be effective. Lady's name is really good. As the saying goes, Ji Ling, Ji Ling. If it doesn't work, it's not a stratagem, but Ji Ling is a stratagem. What a good name, what a good name. Lady's name actually speaks of the mystery of all successful people since the beginning of time. Miss Ji Ling felt a surge of anger rush to her head. An urge to flip the table sprouted in her. If it wasn't for the fact that she was a girl and couldn't curse, she would have cursed him and spat on his face. I know you're not welcome here. But you don't have to be so disgusting. I'm still a girl after all. Could it be that this bastard doesn't even care about the least bit of decorum? Lao Mei stood by the side, feeling the urge to look up to the sky and sigh. Young master, no wonder you're so handsome, but you're still a loner at the age of 19. It's not without reason that you don't have any female confidants. Chapter 13. The conversation came to an impasse. Yun Yang's expression was one of indifference. Ji Ling, on the other hand, was fuming with rage as she gritted her teeth. Ever since returning to the inn last night, the little monkey had been sullen and had stopped eating, looking as if he had something weighing on his mind. Ji Ling had suddenly thought of something, which was why she had come looking for Yun Yang today. She had not expected him to have such an attitude. Lao Mei, who was standing by the side, wore an inexplicably awkward smile. He had cursed his young master's lack of EQ 732 times in his heart. Only the 1,000 illusion monkey was crawling up and down Yun Yang's body, feeling indescribably happy. It squeaked happily and was full of vigor. Both of them sat facing each other awkwardly at a tea table. Naturally, Yunyang had nothing to be embarrassed about, but Jiling was extremely embarrassed. She had never encountered such a situation in her life. "I am truly sorry," Yunyang said apologetically. "My humble abode is simple and it has been a long time since a guest has come. We don't even have tea leaves in the residence. Please forgive me for my poor hospitality." Lao Mei almost fainted again. "Who said we don't have tea leaves?" Jiling's clear eyes stared at Yunyang's handsome face that no picky woman in the world could find a single flaw in. She was rendered speechless by Yunyang's face. After a long time, Jiling laughed as she shook her head. "I'm not afraid of young Master Yun's ridicule, but this is the first time in my life that I've received such treatment from young Master Yun. Perhaps I should say this is the only time in my life." Yunyang said seriously. "You are mistaken, young lady?" Jiling asked. Yunyang said, "Since there is a first time for everything, there will be a second time. This is a rule that must be obeyed, be it the human realm or any other world. Perhaps this is the first time young lady has experienced such treatment, but you will encounter it often in the future." He smiled. "Young lady, slowly, you will realize that I have actually gotten used to this kind of treatment." Jiling's clear eyes stared fixedly at Yunyang's face that even a woman could not help but be jealous of. There was no longer any sense of awe in her heart. Her only thought now was to smash her fist into this handsome face. He directly smashed it to pieces. "I have never seen such a vile man." Jiling's body trembled as she gritted her teeth. She believed that her self-restraint was already very good, and compared to her peers it was much better. However, a casual sentence from this fellow in front of her had caused her to have an uncontrollable urge to kill. "Miss, you will see more and more of them in the future." Yunyang was at ease as he said, "How can there be so many gentlemen in this world that you've met alone? I have to meet some people who are not gentlemen." Jiling snorted coldly and mocked. "It seems that young Master Yin knows his place. He even knows that he is not a gentleman." Yunyang said seriously, "Lady, please do not insult me." Jiling retorted, "You have already admitted that you are not a gentleman, how can you blame me for insulting you?" Yunyang said sternly, "What I meant was, please don't use the word gentleman to insult me. It doesn't matter if you say I'm not a gentleman or if you say I'm a gentleman, it's an insult to me." Jiling was dumbfounded. Jiling had to admit that she was the first person she had met in her life to be able to speak so boldly and shamelessly. She was stunned for a long time before she suddenly giggled. Yunyang was stunned. Shouldn't this lady have left in a fit of rage? Why was she giggling instead? Jiling smiled as she said, "I know that young Master Yun does not welcome me, but I am very curious. Can I ask young Master Yun a few questions?" Yunyang asked helplessly, "What questions? Young Master and I have never met before. We have only met once last night. I wonder why you are doing this?" Jiling asked with interest. "I can't wait for me to leave this place immediately and fly far away, never to be seen again. I really don't understand. Young Master Yin, why is this so?" Yunyang grinned. Just as he was about to speak, Jiling raised a hand and said, "Young Master Yun, there's no need to spout nonsense. If young Master Yun is willing to give me a proper explanation, then I will turn around and leave immediately. I will never be an annoying guest to my master." Yunyang pondered for a moment and looked at her with a probing gaze. Jiling nodded solemnly to show that she was not lying. Yunyang's expression turned serious as he smiled faintly and said, "The first reason is because I do not like people entering my life. I like peace and quiet. The second and most important reason is because young lady's arrival represents a huge problem, and what I am most afraid of is trouble." Jiling was puzzled and said, "I can accept the first explanation, but the second, how can you be sure that I am carrying a huge problem?" Yunyang smiled faintly and said, "First, young lady's first meeting with me last night was not a pleasant one. Second, young lady has brought along a spiritual creature like the Thousand Illusion Monkey. This means that young lady's identity is definitely not ordinary." Jiling nodded in agreement. Who in an ordinary family would allow a young lady to bring along an 8th level mystical beast cub everywhere? Third, young lady's current appearance is fake. Fourth, young lady's current name is fake, Yunyang said confidently. Jiling's eyes darted around as she said, "Cough, it's not very real. Alright, you have a point. Yes, young lady has concealed her identity and came here. Her identity is not ordinary, but she is alone. Usually, as a young lady, there should be an expert accompanying her when she travels. So, young lady must have run away from home. That is the fifth. Jiling coughed twice and nodded guiltily. Just the above alone is already a huge problem. Yin Yang sighed. Is there anything else? Jiling asked. Of course there is. Yin Yang continued to sigh. Sixth, although young lady has disguised herself, I am not blind. Young lady's gaze is clear, her brows are thick, and her chin is sharp. However, the skin of her neck below her chin is different. One side is slightly pale while the other side is normal. The difference is negligible. Jiling blushed and said, so what? If Yun Yang had not mentioned it, she would not have noticed that the skin below her chin was different. This can only prove one thing. Young lady is an extremely arrogant person, and there are not many people whom young lady would normally pay attention to. Yun Yang continued, that is why young lady has developed a habit of tilting her head and lifting one side of her chin to look at others. Jiling frowned as she thought about it. Did this fellow's words make sense? Did she not usually look at these people with tilted heads and lifted chins looking askance? With young lady's temperament, she would probably leave in a fit of anger at the slightest disagreement. Yun Yang continued, moreover, she would not tolerate even the slightest grievance. Am I right? Yun Yang looked at Jiling with a smile. What you said is probably about right. Jiling felt a little guilty. Yun Yang had actually said everything correctly. It would be putting it mildly to say that she was arrogant. In fact, she should be arrogant. But with young lady's stubbornness and arrogance, you actually came to visit me this morning after the unpleasant meeting last night. Yun Yang continued, furthermore, despite being treated coldly, you're still able to suppress your anger despite being enraged. This is truly commendable for a lady like you. Since young lady is willing to put yourself down and stay with me, then, it must be for an extremely important matter. Yun Yang continued, the eighth is the conclusion. For a lady of noble status to leave home, a stubborn and willful character, to do something so important that she is willing to put herself in harm's way, and it's related to me. If this isn't trouble, then what is it? Yun Yang sighed, with my current status and identity, how would I dare to get involved in such a family in trouble? So, young lady, please leave as soon as possible. The guest leaves, the host should rest in peace. Jiling was stunned. Yun Yang had actually thought that she was trouble. You're right. I have something that I need your help with. Jiling could not help but chuckle. Impressive, you can even see this. Yun Yang frowned and said, I have explained it clearly and young lady thinks that what I said makes sense. Then please fulfill your promise and leave quickly. Jiling blinked and said, but you should at least know why I'm looking for you, don't you? Yun Yang was unmoved and said, I'm sorry, I don't want to know. What I want to see the most is for young lady to do as you've said just now. As long as I explain it clearly, you will turn around and leave. You won't be an annoying guest to your master. Jiling chuckled dryly and said carefully, yes, what I said just now was, as long as you explain it clearly, I will turn around and leave. But the problem now is, I haven't turned around. Yun Yang's eyes bulged. Looking at this girl who had gone back on her words, he was speechless. Jiling rolled her eyes and giggled, look, how can I leave if I don't turn around? Don't you think so? He turned to look at Lao Mei and said, housekeeper, your young master has been talking so much, he must be thirsty. Look at his forehead, he's sweating. Quick, go get some tea. Lao Mei felt his stomach twitch as he looked at Yun Yang's expression. It was the first time in his life that he could see his young master being humiliated like this. Young master's forehead was sweating? It was not thirst, it was anxiety. Young lady, how could he not be anxious when you went back on your word? Why did you go back on your word? Yun Yang was exasperated. He had so many secrets, so many things to do, how could he be pestered by this little girl? Jiling rolled her eyes again. Why do I have to keep my word? What kind of hero are you if you don't keep your word? Yun Yang was furious. How could the other party admit that she did not keep her word? I'm not a hero. Jiling retorted righteously, I'm a little girl, not a hero. Yun Yang rubbed his temples and rolled his eyes at the sky. The thousand illusion monkey thought that Yun Yang wanted to play with it, so it climbed onto Yun Yang's head excitedly and dropped its bottom. Its red bottom was right in front of Yun Yang's eyes. Oh. Yun Yang moaned, feeling a headache coming on. Lao Mei had already gone to prepare tea. Yun Yang wondered if he should deduct Lao Mei's salary. He had not even asked for his permission. Just be patient and listen to what I need from you, young Master Yun. Jiling giggled. In Yun Yang's eyes, her smile was like a little fox who had succeeded in stealing a chicken. You're tuning in to the Han Li's Wuxia Chronicles YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support, and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.